No one truly remembers when it all started, but most believe it has been nearly 2 centuries since that fateful day. The day when the world stood still at the news of the birth of an extraordinary, glowing infant in a city in China. The incident quickly captured global attention, prompting scientists and researchers to investigate this strange phenomenon that seemed to defy logic. After conducting countless tests on the child's genetic material, researchers uncovered an unusual DNA strand embedded in the baby's cellular structure. It didn't take long for them to conclude that this strand was the origin of the mysterious phenomenon. Not long after, reports of individuals exhibiting strange abilities began appearing worldwide. People could conjure ice from their hands, manipulate objects without touching them, and perform other seemingly supernatural feats. Further research confirmed that all these individuals carried the same unique genetic strand linked to these bizarre powers. As time passed, the extraordinary became the norm. These new abilities were eventually given a name: quirks. Their emergence opened endless possibilities. Dreams became reality. And soon enough, fantasy and fiction transformed into the new normal. However, the rise of quirks also gave birth to chaos. The systems of law and order enforced by governments began to crumble. With the surge of individuals misusing their powers, crime skyrocketed. These criminals came to be known as villains. To combat this threat, governments around the globe established new organizations. Groups tasked with protecting the innocent, enforcing justice, and preserving peace. They were known as heroes. Among these heroes, some rose above the rest and became icons of hope. Yet, there was one who stood at the very top. The symbol of peace. He was the indomitable All Might. But this is not his story. This is the tale of Izuku Midoriya, the boy who rose to godhood in a world ruled by heroes. "Don't do this, Kuken," a trembling green-haired boy shouted, standing defensively in front of another child. "What the hell, Deku?" barked a spiky blonde-haired boy, his voice filled with anger. "Get out of my way." I can't, Kuken. "I won't let you bully him," the green-haired boy replied, his voice shaking but his stance unwavering. "Oi, Deku. Are you really going to take a beating for him?" sneered one of Bakugo's cronies. "Why yes. Because that's what a hero would do." The green-haired boy, Izuku Midoriya, felt his heart race as he glanced around the empty park, hoping for an adult to appear. But no one was there. The blonde-haired boy, Bakugo, growled. "Still spouting that crap about being a hero, huh?" Small sparks flared in his palms. Izuku swallowed hard but stood firm. "Yes. I'll be a hero." Bakugo burst out laughing. "As if a worthless, quirkless loser like you could ever be a hero." He glanced behind Izuku and smirked. "Look at that, Deku. The kid you were protecting already ran off." Izuku turned to look and saw the boy was gone. When he faced Bakugo again, the blonde was grinning maliciously. "Guess you need a reminder of your place." Bakugo growled, igniting more sparks in his hands. Izuku closed his eyes, bracing for the pain he knew was coming. This wasn't new to him. The teachers never stopped Bakugo, and the adults always ignored what happened. No one ever came to his rescue. He expected the same today. He'd go home covered in burns and bruises, pretending he'd fallen, just to keep his mom from worrying. So he waited. And waited. But nothing happened. No heat. No pain. Had he grown so used to it that he no longer felt anything? "What the hell, Deku?" Izuku flinched at Bakugo's furious shout. Opening his eyes, he found Bakugo glaring at him, confused and angry. "Why can't I touch you?" Bakugo demanded. "What?" Izuku stammered. Bakugo clenched his teeth and charged, palms outstretched to deliver another explosion. Izuku froze, fear paralyzing him. Bakugo's hands were aimed straight at his head. Was he actually trying to kill him? Time slowed. Suddenly, Izuku's senses expanded. He could see everything, the energy crackling in Bakugo's hands, the birds in the trees, and even the creaking swings behind him. He didn't understand what was happening. But he knew he had to stop Bakugo. And his wish was granted. Bakugo's explosion erupted but stopped inches from Izuku's face, splitting into 2 streams as if repelled by an invisible force. "What the hell?" Bakugo roared. "Just stand still and take it, damn it." He sent another blast at Izuku's chest, but the explosion fizzled out before it could hit him. Izuku felt something, a presence entering the park. It was a man with weary, tired eyes, but Izuku couldn't focus on him. Bakugo, growing desperate, lunged with a punch instead. But his fist stopped just inches away. He pushed harder, But it was no use. It wasn't a barrier he could feel, it was like an invisible force was simply preventing him from getting closer. His frustration boiled over as he locked eyes with Izuku. And for the first time, Bakugo froze in fear. The eyes staring back at him weren't the familiar frightened green ones. They were glowing, shimmering like polished emeralds. They weren't the eyes of someone weak. They were sharp, cold, piercing. And they judged him. Bakugo hated them. "What are you kids doing?" A deep voice broke the tension. The strange force vanished, and Bakugo immediately recoiled, stepping back. Without another word, he turned and fled with his lackeys trailing behind him. Izuku remained frozen, his glowing eyes dimming as confusion and fear began to settle in. Izuku glanced toward the park entrance, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. A man with messy black hair and bandages loosely wrapped around his shoulders was approaching him. As though all the strength had been drained from his body, Izuku's eyes slowly closed, and he collapsed backward. Instead of hitting the hard ground, however, he fell onto something soft. Something warm. Izuku instinctively burrowed deeper into the warmth, his body craving comfort. Within moments, his consciousness faded completely. While Izuku rested, his mind wandered to a distant memory he had long buried. Flashback. Izuku Midoriya was a cheerful and optimistic 4-year-old boy with dreams of becoming a great hero. His dark green hair and sparkling green eyes reflected the boundless excitement and energy he carried. He was currently seated in a doctor's office, his mother, Enko Midoriya, sitting close by. Enko was a striking woman with emerald green hair and a graceful figure that turned heads. But today, worry weighed heavily on her face, something she hadn't felt in years. Izuku, however, remained oblivious to his mother's anxiety. Why? Because he was too thrilled about what the day might bring. Today was his 4th birthday, the age when most children unlocked their quirks. Enko had taken him to the hospital for a checkup, eager to find out what quirk her son possessed. "Mom, do you think my quirk will be amazing?" Izuku asked, grinning widely. Enko forced a smile, trying to hide her unease. "Of course, sweetheart. I'm sure you'll be incredible." Izuku beamed and began bouncing excitedly in his chair. Meanwhile, Enko's heart grew heavier, guilt gnawing at her. Moments later, the door creaked open, and the doctor stepped inside, his face shadowed by an unsettling seriousness. Enko's anxiety spiked. The doctor avoided making eye contact as he sat across from them, shuffling through a pile of papers before letting out a sigh. Doctor, is something wrong?" Enko asked, her voice trembling. "Hey, doctor." Izuku piped up eagerly. "What's my quirk? Is it something awesome like All Might's?" The doctor hesitated, rubbing his temples. I'm not entirely sure what to say." Izuku's smile faltered. Though he was young, he picked up on the uncertainty in the doctor's tone. The doctor let out another sigh before continuing. "From all indications, young Midoriya should have a quirk. But, for some reason, it hasn't manifested yet." Izuku's face fell completely. But. Enko leaned forward desperately. Does that mean he can still awaken his quirk?" I mean, most kids his age already have theirs." The doctor nodded. "It's possible his quirk is just dormant and needs a trigger to awaken. Here, look." He held up an X-ray of Izuku's foot. "See this? Most people with quirks have a single joint in their pinky toe. Izuku has the same structure, which means he likely has a quirk. It might just take more time or specific circumstances to activate it." Izuku's eyes shimmered with hope. Does that mean I can still become a hero?" "Yes." The doctor offered a reassuring smile. "You'll just have to be patient and wait for it to surface." Tears poured down Izuku's cheeks. Enko, equally emotional, scooped him into her arms as he clung to her shirt. She thanked the doctor and left the office, her son sniffling quietly in her arms. Back home, Enko set Izuku down gently. Seeing her son's usual enthusiasm replaced by silence broke her heart. "Izuku, sweetheart, why don't you freshen up? I'll make your favorite meal." Izuku nodded weakly and trudged to the bathroom. Dinner was a somber affair. Izuku ate mechanically, barely acknowledging the delicious meal his mother had prepared. Afterward, he cleaned up his dishes as usual. "Good night, Mom," he muttered, heading toward his room without another word. Later, as Enko passed by his door, she heard voices and peeked inside. Izuku was watching clips of All Might on his computer, his eyes wide with admiration. He turned and caught sight of his mother. Mom, can I still be a hero?" Izuku's voice wavered. See, can I be like All Might? Inko froze. She wanted to tell him yes, to assure him he could do anything. But she also knew the dangers heroes faced and couldn't bear the thought of her son risking his life. Tears welled in her eyes as she ran to him, pulling him into a tight hug. Yes, Izuku. You can. You can. End flashback. Izuku's eyes fluttered open. Sunlight forced him to squint as he shielded his face with his arm and slowly sat up. He glanced around and realized he was lying on a park bench. Finally awake, huh? Took you long enough, a dry voice remarked. Izuku turned toward the sound. A man sat at his feet, sipping from a juice box. He had disheveled black hair and loose bandages around his neck. His clothes were dark and plain. Izuku flinched under the man's sharp gaze. His eyes, red and shadowed, made it clear he hadn't slept in a while. The name's Shouta Aizawa, the man said in a monotone voice. Mind explaining what was going on earlier? Izuku fidgeted nervously. Thanks for helping me, but I don't know what you're talking about. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, studying him closely. You know, Aizawa said flatly, I'm a pro-hero. Lying to me won't do you any favors. A hero? Izuku asked softly. I've never heard of you. Not surprising, Aizawa replied. I don't care much for fame. Oh. Now, are you going to tell me the truth? Keikakin and I were just playing, Izuku said weakly, looking away. Aizawa frowned. He had seen enough to know that whatever had happened between Izuku and the blonde boy earlier wasn't play. He let out a deep breath. All right, let's get you home, he said, standing up. Izuku nodded and hopped off the bench, taking his place beside the man as they started walking toward his home. As they walked, Aizawa briefly glanced at the boy from the corner of his eye. He had noticed back in the park that Izuku had clearly used his quirk. From his observations, it seemed to be some sort of barrier-based ability, which was fairly uncommon. Still, Aizawa had a hunch that there was something more to the boy's quirk than what met the eye. Lost in thought, Aizawa noticed Izuku fidgeting. He recognized the signs well enough. The boy wanted to ask something but couldn't quite summon the courage. You want to ask something? Aizawa spoke in a calm, uninterested tone. Go ahead. You said you were a hero, right? Izuku asked quietly. What's your hero name? I don't think you'd recognize me, but I go by Eraserhead. Wait. You're Eraserhead? Izuku exclaimed, his eyes wide with admiration. Aizawa eyed the boy, who had practically lit up at the mention of his name. You know who I am. Of course. You're the underground hero, Eraserhead. You work in the shadows like no one else. You're like Batman, only without the wealth, Izuku finished with an excited grin. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, impressed. For a 5-year-old to know about underground heroes was remarkable. Impressive. A fan, are you? Izuku laughed sheepishly. Yeah, I like learning about heroes. So, you're aiming to be one yourself? Aizawa asked, glancing at him from the corner of his eye. Izuku's excited smile faded slightly into a more somber expression. Yeah. I want to become a hero. But I don't know how, without a quirk. Aizawa blinked. What are you talking about? Didn't you just use your quirk back at the park? Izuku's eyes widened in realization. Oh my god. I completely forgot about that. He groaned, grabbing his head with his hands. Aizawa sighed, clearly exhausted. You do know that using your quirk in public is against the law, right? I know, Izuku stammered. But I didn't have a quirk before today. Aizawa turned his head toward the boy. How old are you? 5. Interesting. So, you awakened your quirk today. Why yeah. A late bloomer, huh, Aizawa mused. Soon, they arrived at an apartment complex. Aizawa noted the area was unusually peaceful and quiet. Maybe I'll look into finding a place here, he thought. Aizawa followed Izuku to the 3rd floor and stopped in front of a door. Izuku knocked, and after a few moments, a woman in her late 20s opened the door. She had the same green hair as Izuku, though it was straighter, and Aizawa found her strikingly beautiful, though he'd never voiced that aloud. Izuku, you're home, the woman greeted, smiling before noticing Aizawa. Her smile remained as she acknowledged him. And you've brought a guest. Yeah. Mom, this is the underground hero I was talking about yesterday. He's Eraserhead. Izuku exclaimed excitedly. Oh my, how can I assist you, Mr. Eraserhead? Inko asked, bowing slightly. Aizawa shook his head. No need for formalities. I found him unconscious in the park and made sure he was all right. Inko bowed in thanks. I'm so grateful, Mr. Eraserhead. Aizawa glanced at Izuku, who was practically bouncing with excitement, and then at Inko, who seemed to catch on to his unspoken message. Mom. I awakened my quirk today. Izuku said, jumping in place. That's wonderful, Izuku-chan. Why don't you go wash up, and we can head to the doctor after lunch? Inko suggested. Okay. Izuku cheered before dashing inside. Quite the energetic one you've got there, Aizawa remarked, watching the boy run off. I can't deny that, Inko replied with a smile. He's always been full of energy. Aizawa nodded absently. By the way, do you know someone named Kukin? Inko blanked, surprised by the question. Kukin? You mean Katsuki? Why do you ask? You do know him. Can you tell me where he lives? Inko hesitated for a moment. Yes, I know where he lives, but why do you want to know? Aizawa stared at her for a moment before responding. I saw him using his quirk in the park. I need to speak with his parents. Using quirks in public is strictly prohibited. Oh, I hope he's not in trouble. Aizawa thought for a moment, then replied, not for now. I'm just issuing a warning. He's a child, after all. But if he continues, we might need to send him for rehabilitation. Well, his house is down the street in the yellow house. Number 53, Enko said. Aizawa nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Midoriya. Have a good day. You too, Mr. Eraserhead. 3 days later. Izuku sat in his classroom, a wide grin plastered across his face, a grin that hadn't left since the start of the day. Today was the most exciting day of his life. Today, they would announce the results of his quirk. He could hardly contain his excitement. The anticipation was eating at his patience. After lunch, the mother and son had visited the doctor's office once more. The same doctor who had tested Izuku's quirk a year ago led him to the testing lab, where the other doctors had conducted numerous tests. Yet, none of them had been able to reach a conclusion that day. Usually, quirk tests yielded results immediately, or at most, the following day. But for some reason, the doctors had struggled to determine Izuku's quirk. They had been called back the next day for further testing, and then again, they were told they needed more time. Finally, the doctors had said they would declare the results the following day. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Students quickly packed their things, eager to leave. Izuku hastily stuffed his books into his bag, excitement building as he couldn't wait any longer. Just as he was about to race out of the classroom, Bakugo appeared in front of him. So, Deku, have you figured out what your quirk is yet? Bakugo asked with a mocking smirk. I haven't found out yet, Kukin. The doctors said I'd get the results today, Izuku replied, shifting nervously. Bakugo scoffed. Oh, really? Well, guess what, everyone. Deku's getting his quirk results today. After 3 whole days of waiting. I bet it's so pathetic that even the doctors don't want to tell him about it. Yeah, right. Like Deku could ever have a useful quirk, one of Bakugo's followers chimed in, laughing. That's not fair, Keikuken, Izuku stuttered, trying to defend himself. Bakugo grinned cruelly. Oh? What's wrong, Deku? Should I ask which building you threw yourself off to get a quirk? Izuku flinched at the cruel remark as Bakugo and his lackeys burst into laughter. Bakugo snorted. You'll never be a hero, Deku. Never. With that, Bakugo turned and stormed off, followed by his minions. Izuku stood frozen, tears welling up in his eyes. The other students glanced at him with pity, but no one said anything. Izuku quickly wiped his eyes, trying to hold it together. No. I won't cry. Today's the day, he muttered to himself before running out of the classroom towards the school's main gate. There, his mother was waiting for him with a warm smile. She opened the car door for him, and after they got in, they headed toward the hospital. They found themselves in the doctor's office shortly after. A few minutes later, the doctor entered and sat across from them. He placed the files down and wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Doctor, about the quirk. Inko began, trailing off as the doctor let out a nervous laugh. Well, Miss Midoriya, young Izuku here is a truly unique case, the doctor said, his voice filled with nervous energy. What do you mean, doctor? Inko asked, hope flickering in her eyes. I'm not even sure where to begin, the doctor sighed, picking up the file and flipping through the documents. To be honest, Last year when you came in for quirk testing, and your son's quirk didn't show up, I thought his quirk was too weak to manifest. Does that mean my quirk is weak? Izuku asked, his voice filled with anxiety. Was Kaken right? Was he really useless? Weak. The doctor chuckled. If your quirk is weak, then every other quirk is practically useless. What do you mean, doctor? Enko asked, confused. Let me explain it like this, the doctor began, wiping his brow again. Izuku's quirk is like a living and breathing paradox in the field of mathematics and science. Enko and Izuku stared at him, bewildered. I'm sure you've heard of the Zeno paradox, or the Achilles paradox. The doctor asked. No, sir, Enko answered, shaking her head. Well, it's one of the famous paradoxes proposed by the Greek philosopher Zeno, the doctor continued. It describes a race between the swift Achilles, a demigod, and a tortoise. The tortoise gets a head start, and they both begin racing at the same time. The problem is, no matter how fast Achilles runs, he can never overtake the tortoise. Enko and Izuku listened attentively, though the explanation was complex. The argument is that, by the time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has already moved further ahead. Every time Achilles covers the tortoise's distance, the tortoise has moved a little further, so Achilles will never be able to catch up. Enko blinked in confusion. So, what does this have to do with my son's quirk? Well, Izuku's quirk operates in a similar manner, the doctor explained. In fact, his quirk brings the concept of infinity into reality. Infinity, to reality. Enko repeated, trying to wrap her head around the idea. Exactly, the doctor said, nodding. You see, his quirk divides space itself into an infinite number of parts. The barrier we saw earlier? It was just his quirk manifesting this division. What we are witnessing is his quirk turning an abstract concept like infinity into something real. Izuku's jaw dropped in amazement. So, my quirk is really strong. The doctor smiled. Your quirk is likely the strongest one we've ever documented, young Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened. Even stronger than All Might's. The doctor chuckled. Most likely, if we factor in all the aspects of your quirk. Izuku was in awe. Wait. There's more to my quirk. Yes, the doctor nodded. Besides this, your son also possesses an ocular quirk that enhances his perception. From our tests, we discovered that it allows him to see other people's quirks and even predict when they'll use them. Enko was speechless. That's incredible. Yes, it's quite overwhelming, the doctor agreed. We're still learning about its full potential. Your son has two very powerful quirks, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. Enko swallowed hard. She had always wanted her son to be strong, but now it seemed like it was all spiraling out of control. But that's not the end of it. There's more. Enko nearly shouted. Ahaha. The doctor let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, about that. It appears your son possesses an unusual energy within him. It's unlike anything we've documented before. This energy seems to be tied to his other two abilities. My goodness. Enko muttered, taking several deep breaths to steady herself. Same reaction here. The doctor chuckled lightly. We've decided to call your son's ability to turn infinity into reality limitless, and his eye-based power will be referred to as six eyes, like the concept of a sixth sense. How do you like them? Awesome. Izuku grinned. They sound super powerful. Yeah, I thought so too, the doctor responded with a smile. Hero Association headquarters. The next day. 3 figures stood in a large room, overlooking the city of Honia through a massive window. One of the figures was a woman in her late 40s, with ash blonde hair and piercing turquoise eyes. She maintained a composed and serious expression, dressed in a sleek black jacket suit, a purple blouse, and a necklace that hung around her neck. She sat behind the sole desk in the room, her gaze fixed on the person standing opposite her. The second person was a thin, middle-aged man with chin-length beige hair that was slightly messy. His formal attire consisted of a black shirt with a white undershirt and matching black pants. A loose tie hung around his neck, and black shoes completed his look. His face showed signs of fatigue, likely due to lack of sleep. He stood behind the woman, his curiosity evident as he eyed the person in front of him. The third individual was a humanoid with the features of a large dog, specifically a beagle. He stood tall and sturdy, with the head of a beagle and tan-colored skin that matched his face. His outfit consisted of a white dress shirt, waistcoat, black blazer, and matching trousers. He wore a black and white tie that resembled the spots of a Dalmatian. So, what do you have for us, Mr. Kenji? The woman behind the desk asked. As I reported earlier, Miss President, the crime rate has been rising steadily over the last 5 years. It's higher than it was in the previous decade, Kenji replied. The president's expression darkened, having read the police chief's reports. I see. But are you absolutely certain, Chief? Kenji nodded grimly. I'm as certain as I can be, Miss President. Even with an increase in the number of heroes and police, we're still struggling to handle all the crimes across the nation. The president's anxiety grew. The progress made in the last 5 years to restore some semblance of peace seemed to be slipping away. The downfall of a major villain was supposed to reduce villain activity, but it now seemed like nothing more than wishful thinking. But that's not all, Kenji continued, his voice heavy with concern. The president raised an eyebrow, bracing herself for more bad news. What is it, Kenji-san? Kenji paused for a moment before speaking again. It seems the power of villain quirks has also grown significantly. The president's face went cold, her heart sinking. Explain, she demanded, her voice icy. Kenji detailed several terrifying cases. Over the last 5 years, simple quirks have caused massive destruction. A basic fire quirk took down an entire skyscraper without the use of accelerants. A water-based quirk drowned 100 hostages trapped in a building. A telekinetic quirk that previously could only move small objects was able to raise an entire building and throw it at another. He stopped, letting the gravity of his words sink in. Take any instance from the last few years, and you'll see simple quirks causing far more devastation than they were ever meant to. The president's brows furrowed. Are you sure, Kenji-san? Could this be the result of a quirk-enhancing drug? Kenji shook his head. Unfortunately, no. After thoroughly examining the captured villains, we didn't find any drugs that could enhance quirks. The president exchanged a brief glance with her assistant before he spoke up. The death toll has also risen. People are beginning to question the hero's ability to protect them. There are murmurs of discontent in the public. The president closed her eyes, silently processing the information. Years of experience as the head of the Hero Public Safety Commission helped her maintain a calm exterior, though inside, she was deeply unsettled. She had known the situation was worsening, but the extent of it was far worse than she had anticipated. If things continued at this rate, they would be forced to intervene directly in the fight against villains, something the Commission had always avoided. But that also meant they would become vulnerable, opening the door for someone to uncover the hidden truths the Commission had buried over the past decade. However, those concerns could be dealt with later. For now, the pressing issue was dealing with the villains, and it seemed that harsher measures would soon be necessary. Understood, Chief Kenji-san. Your report is noted. The Hero Public Safety Commission will liaise with the government to take appropriate actions against the villains. You are dismissed. The chief of the police bowed and exited the room, leaving the president and her successor alone. The president let out a deep sigh and leaned back in her chair. These truly are troubling times, aren't they, Yukimaru? Indeed, they are, ma'am. The lanky man responded. But on a slightly more positive note, he added, pulling a file from his briefcase, I've brought you a report on a young individual. Yukimaru handed the file to the president. Curiosity piqued, the president glanced at the file, knowing Yukimaru wouldn't bring up something unless it was important. She opened it without question. The first thing that caught her eye was the photograph attached to the file. It showed a green-haired boy with silver highlights and piercing emerald eyes that seemed to look straight through you. Izuku Midoriya, the president murmured, what's so significant about this child, Yukimaru? Please, read on, Miss President. The details are quite revealing. As she read through the file, her astonishment grew. What? How is that even possible? The president exclaimed. Yukimaru nodded gravely. Yes, this child's quirks were analyzed by a doctor named Takahara Gecko. According to him, the boy possesses what may be the most powerful quirk known to exist, and the doctor is confident in that conclusion. Right now, the exact scope of his quirk is unclear, but one thing is certain: it can manifest infinity into reality. The president's eyes widened in disbelief. That? How is that even possible? Yukimaru shook his head. No one really knows. But the doctor believes this is only the beginning. The boy's abilities are far more complex than anyone initially realized. The file also mentions he has 2 other quirks, the president added. Having 2 quirks is rare enough, but 3? That's practically unheard of. Yukimaru nodded in agreement. Yes. Limitless, 6 eyes, and this strange energy coursing through his body. This child could be pivotal in shaping the future. He could even surpass All Might when the time comes. The president pondered the information. They'd encountered a similar situation before, with a boy whose quirk showed extraordinary potential, and they had made him a hero. But this situation was different. Could this boy really live up to the hype? Are you sure about this, Yukimaru? Do you truly think it's worth it for us to get involved with this child? If you ask me, we should definitely take him under our wing. In these unstable times, we need all the assets we can get our hands on. I understand, the president sighed. Very well, reach out to the Midoriya family and offer them training. If they agree, great. If not, we'll respect their decision. That evening, Enko was preparing dinner, a wide smile on her face as she watched her son playing with his All Might figurine. She could hardly believe what had happened the day before. Her son, Izuku, had not one, not two, but three quirks. And they were powerful ones at that. The ability to bring infinity into reality, the ability to perceive at an extraordinary rate, and an unknown energy coursing through him. It felt surreal. For a moment, she wondered if this was all just a dream and that once she woke up, none of it would be real. But none of that mattered now. Her son had quirks 3, in fact. And that meant he had the potential to chase his dreams. And she would be by his side, supporting him every step of the way. Just as she finished preparing dinner, there was a knock at the door. Wiping her hands on a cloth, Enko walked to the door and opened it to find two men in dark suits. The first man was tall, lanky, and had messy beige hair that reached his chin. He appeared to be sleep-deprived. The second man was shorter, with dark sunglasses even though it was nighttime. He carried a briefcase. Can I help you? Enko asked, somewhat uncertain. The lanky man stepped forward, introducing himself. Good evening, ma'am. I'm Yukimaru, and this is my colleague, Yamamoto. We're from the Hero Public Safety Commission, and we need to speak with you about your son. May we come in? Oh, of course, Enko stammered, stepping aside to let them in. As they walked into the living room, she noticed them glancing at Izuku, who was still playing. Izuku, why don't you go to your room for a bit? Izuku didn't protest and ran to his room, closing the door behind him. Enko gestured for the men to sit and offered them water. They thanked her and took a seat on the couch as she made sure they were comfortable. Thank you for your kind hospitality, ma'am, Yukimaru said, while Yamamoto nodded in agreement. Now, perhaps it's time we talk about your son. Oh okay, Enko replied, a bit nervous. Yukimaru began. Your son's quirk was officially registered just yesterday, and we must say, he is quite remarkable. He possesses not one, not two, but 3 distinct quirks. Enko was left speechless. She had suspected something like this could happen, but she hadn't expected it to be so overwhelming. You must understand, Yukimaru continued, if this information were to spread, both you and your son would be prime targets. Enko felt her heart rate spike. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation. That's why we've come with an offer, Yukimaru said, signaling his partner to place a briefcase on the table and open it. Enko's eyes widened at the sight. The briefcase was filled with stacks of cash. In this briefcase is 10 million yen. It's enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Additionally, we'll arrange for you to move to a much more luxurious home. All you need to do is, Yukimaru placed a contract on the table, sign this document and hand over the guardianship of your son. Yukimaru's gaze was cold as he observed Enko, expecting her to accept without hesitation. After all, many others had given up their children for financial gain. He was confident she would do the same. But what followed was not what he had anticipated. How? How dare you? Enko's voice was full of fury. Both men jumped as every object in the room began to glow with an eerie green light and flowed towards them. Knives and forks hovered threateningly in the air, their blades pointed at the men. How dare you come into my home and think you can take my son from me? Enko shouted, her anger evident. The floating knives drifted closer with every word. Yukimaru looked at her, startled. This was the first time he had seen such a strong reaction from a parent. Despite her fury, there was a deep pain in her eyes, and it made him rethink the nature of their offer. Hell hath no fury like a mother protecting her child, Yamamoto commented lightly, earning a chuckle from Yukimaru. What's so funny, you scoundrels? Enko spat. If you would just calm down for a moment, Yukimaru said, raising his hands in a pacifying gesture. You wouldn't believe it, but we've made this same offer to several other parents, and they've all accepted it without question, eager to trade their children for wealth. And you expect me to act like them? If you think that, then you are gravely mistaken, Enko replied, her voice seething with rage. Yukimaru let out a soft laugh. Not at all. In fact, we're pleased that you didn't accept right away. The children of those parents were broken when they learned their parents had abandoned them for money. And if we are to train the next symbol of peace, he'll need the emotional support of someone who truly cares about him. In what? Enko stammered, confusion creeping into her voice. Yukimaru smiled warmly at her. Miss Midoriya, would you allow us to train your son to become the next hero, the one who will follow in All Might's footsteps? Before Enko could respond, the door to Izuku's room suddenly flew open, and Izuku dashed into the living room. Mom. Please accept their offer, Izuku pleaded. Enko hesitated, unsure of what to do. You don't have to leave him, Miss Midoriya, Yukimaru reassured her. You can stay by his side the entire time. We'll only train him during the day, and he'll return home to you in the evening. We won't do anything that goes against your wishes. I suppose, Enko said, still uncertain, but softening in her resolve. Yukimaru nodded. Also, it would be best if you relocated to a more secure residence so that we can provide enhanced protection for both you and Izuku. The Hero Public Safety Commission will cover all the costs. Izuku's eyes lit up with hope. Can I become like All Might? He asked eagerly. Yukimaru smiled. Izuku, not only will you become like him, you'll surpass him. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. The voice of the world's mightiest hero, the emblem of peace, echoed throughout the room. A moment later, a hand emerged from the blanket on the bed and swiftly hit the clock, silencing the rhythmic voice of the hero. A low voice grumbled in frustration as the blanket was tossed aside, and a figure climbed out of bed. The room was spacious and tidy. On one side stood two overflowing bookshelves. Across from them was a desk with dual monitors. A door led to the bathroom, and a TV hung on the wall opposite the bed. A rug covered the floor, and a cabinet filled with hero figurines stood facing the bookshelves. With half-open eyes, the figure trudged toward the door leading to the personal washroom. He entered and stood before a basin, staring into the mirror above. As his eyes adjusted, the figure took in the sight of his reflection. The figure had spiky green hair with silver streaks. His eyes sparkled like emeralds. A strong jawline complemented his smooth skin. It was none other than Izuku Midoriya, now 14 years old. He grabbed his toothbrush, applied some toothpaste, and brushed his teeth. Afterward, he stepped into the shower for a long rinse. Once finished, he wrapped a towel around his waist and exited the bathroom. Standing in front of the full-length mirror, Izuku admired his growing physique. He had gotten taller in the last few years, now standing at 5 feet 7 inches, a height to be proud of for his age. His torso was showing signs of a developing six-pack, and while his biceps weren't overly muscular, they were still toned enough to give him an athletic appearance. He approached his wardrobe and picked out his school uniform. It consisted of a white shirt, white pants, a blue blazer with silver buttons, and a blue tie. He picked up his custom sunglasses, designed specifically for his ocular quirk, and put them on. Once dressed, he grabbed his school bag and left his room. He entered a larger room, which served as both the dining and kitchen area. His mother was busy cooking, likely preparing his breakfast. Good morning, Mom. Izuku greeted with his usual cheer. Good morning, Izu-chan, his mother responded with a bright smile. Izuku placed his bag beside the chair at the dining table and smiled. Their lives had changed ever since the day he discovered his multiple quirks, and the HPSC scouts came knocking. After the dramatic incident where his mother threatened to harm the two HPSC scouts if they tried to take him away, and even threatened to call the police, the HPSC had eventually managed to explain their offer. All the HPSC wanted was to train a future hero with the potential to surpass All Might and maintain peace in these troubled times. They explained that with the growing chaos, Izuku's power couldn't go to waste. In exchange, the HPSC would provide protection, housing, and cover Izuku's education. At first, his mother had been hesitant, while he was eager to accept the offer. 2 days later, the HPSC had arranged for movers to relocate them to a more sophisticated area, settling them into a large 3-bedroom apartment, something they could never have afforded before. But as he matured, his perspective began to shift. He realized that nothing in life came without a price. Recently, he had grown suspicious of the HPSC and their intentions. The more he thought about it, the more he became paranoid. His powers were too great to be ignored, and the idea that people would kill for even a fraction of his abilities only deepened his distrust. He began to feel that the HPSC's kindness was just a way to ensnare him, making him indebted to them. Izuku sneered at the thought. If they ever threatened his mother or anyone close to him, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate them all. No matter what they had done for him and his mother. This shift in mindset was another result of his experiences. Whether it was for better or worse, he wasn't sure. But he no longer viewed the world in simple terms of black and white. No longer did he believe all heroes were virtuous and all villains were evil. He had learned that even heroes had their flaws, and there was goodness to be found in villains too. He no longer flinched at the thought of death or violence. Unbeknownst to his mother, one of the key components of the HPSC's training program had been to familiarize him with the harsh reality of taking lives. The HPSC, unlike the typical hero society, had a different outlook. Heroes should be prepared to kill if the lives of innocents were at risk. This mindset had significantly diverged from the standard narrative where heroes were seen as incapable of harming anyone. The HPSC, however, believed that if a villain took the life of an innocent, they forfeited their right to be treated as human and must face the consequences accordingly. Izuku, brought up under this philosophy, found himself at odds with the idealistic portrayal of heroes. While he still cherished the dream of saving others with a smile, he accepted the grim truth that he would not hesitate to eliminate a villain if it meant protecting the innocent. "Here's your breakfast," his mother's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone light and cheerful as she placed the dishes on the table. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku replied, folding his hands in silent thanks before diving into the meal. Izuku's mother had transformed as well, shedding the tiredness that once clung to her. The bags under her eyes had disappeared, and the extra weight she once carried had melted away, leaving her leaner and even more beautiful than before. During one of their family outings, a magazine scout had approached her with an offer to model. At first, she was reluctant, but with Izuku's encouragement, she embraced the opportunity. She quickly rose to fame in the modeling world, particularly in the fashion industry, where her contracts with various companies saw substantial profits. There was even talk of her signing a deal with a pro hero who had ventured into the business. Her success had allowed her to support Izuku's education in ways they hadn't imagined before. Although the HPSC had initially insisted on homeschooling him to keep his quirks hidden, his mother had insisted that he attend a traditional school to remain connected with the outside world. Thanks to her newfound career, she was able to afford his tuition at Sumi Private Academy, a prestigious institution. Reluctantly, the HPSC had agreed and fabricated a new quirk for him, space manipulation wand that, while powerful, was less conspicuous than his true abilities, limitless, six eyes, and cursed energy. After finishing his breakfast and cleaning up, Izuku grabbed his bag, wished his mother a good day, and headed out the door. "Don't forget, you have a meeting with the HPSC president today," his mother called after him. His school was nearby, so he walked at a relaxed pace. The area was quiet, with few villain attacks throughout the year. The rich neighborhood was well patrolled, and it seemed that even thieves had learned to avoid it. After half an hour, he reached the school gates. As he stood there, his bag hanging loosely from his shoulder and his hands tucked into his pockets, he allowed himself a rare smile. He would miss this place more than he cared to admit. It was where he had made so many memories, and he was grateful to his mother for giving him the chance to attend such a school. Flashback. Izuku stood at the door to his new classroom, bag over his shoulder, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. A playful grin spread across his face. Today was his first day at Sumi Private Academy, and he had already set his sights on a little prank. To make a statement, he wore bandages wrapped around his eyes. "All right, class, today we have a new student joining us," the teacher announced, drawing attention from the room. "He's transferring from another school, which is why his admission is a bit late. Please come in." As his name was called, Izuku pushed open the door and walked in, feeling the curious stares of his future classmates despite the bandages covering his eyes. He moved toward the teacher and stood beside him. "Could you introduce yourself?" the teacher asked. Izuku tilted his head slightly, responding with a mischievous smile. "How should I do that?" "Just the usual, your name, likes, dislikes, and such," the teacher answered kindly. Izuku beamed at the class. "Well, my name's Izuku Midoriya. I like a few things, but as for dislikes, I don't really have any. Hobbies? A little of this and that. As for my dreams, well, I don't have one yet." Izuku didn't flinch at the thought of death or violence anymore. Secretly, without his mother's knowledge, one part of the Hero Public Safety Commission's training involved him becoming accustomed to taking lives. They had taught him that, while heroes should always aim to save lives, they must also be ready to eliminate a villain if innocent people were in danger. The HPSC was not like the conventional hero society. They didn't present themselves as flawless beings who never resorted to lethal force. Members of the HPSC believed that if a villain harmed an innocent, they forfeited their humanity and deserved to be eliminated. Izuku had grown up with that ideology in mind. While he desired to save lives with a smile, he was no stranger to the necessity of ending a villain's life if it meant protecting the innocent. "Here's your breakfast," his mother sang cheerfully, placing the dishes on the table. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku replied, folding his hands in a brief prayer before starting his meal. His mother had undergone a transformation too. Gone were the dark bags under her eyes, and the weight she had put on over the years had vanished. She was now more slender, and her beauty had only become more striking with time. During a family outing, a magazine scout approached her and offered her a modeling career. Initially hesitant, she had followed Izuku's encouragement and pursued modeling, allowing her to no longer feel confined to her home. Over time, she gained popularity, especially in traditional wear and sports outfits, and companies she worked with saw huge profits. Recently, she was in talks to sign with a famous pro hero who had a business venture in the fashion industry. His mother also played a crucial role in his education. The HPSC had wanted to homeschool him to keep his quirks under wraps, but his mother insisted he attend regular school to avoid becoming reclusive. By then, her modeling career had taken off, allowing her to send him to the prestigious Sumi private academy. The HPSC relented and agreed to keep his true quirks classified while fabricating a new quirk for him. So instead of limitless, 6 eyes, and cursed energy, he was given the quirk of space manipulation. While still a powerful ability, it wasn't as remarkable as his original abilities. Finishing his breakfast, he cleaned up and grabbed his bag, wishing his mother a good day before stepping out of the house. "Don't forget, you have a meeting with the president of the HPSC today," she reminded him. His school was within walking distance, so he strolled leisurely. This area rarely saw any villain activity, likely due to its wealthy population and vigilant patrols. He had expected at least some petty criminals, but it seemed thieves were reluctant to target such affluent neighborhoods. Half an hour later, he arrived at the school gate, his bag slung casually over his shoulder, hands in his pockets, and a nostalgic smile on his face. He wouldn't admit it, but he would miss this place. So many memories had been made here, and he was grateful to his mother and whatever forces had allowed him this opportunity. One memory in particular stood out the day he first walked into this school. Flashback. Izuku stood before the classroom door of Sumi Private Academy, his bag over his shoulder, hands in his pockets, with a mischievous grin. It was the first day of school, and he had come prepared with a prank. "All right, class, we have a new student joining us today," the teacher announced. "He's transferred from another school, which is why his admission was delayed. Come on in." When his name was called, Izuku opened the door and entered, his bandages over his eyes drawing curious stares from his new classmates. He walked to the teacher's desk and stood beside him. "Introduce yourself, please," the teacher asked kindly. "Introduce myself." Izuku tilted his head. "Like the usual stuff? Name, likes, dislikes." "That's right," the teacher confirmed. Izuku smiled at the class. "My name's Izuku Midoriya. My likes? Well, I like a few things. Dislikes? I don't think I have any. Hobbies? This and that. And dreams? Well, I don't really have one." Flashback end. Izuku chuckled at the memory. Those were the days, he thought to himself. Back in the present, he sat at his desk in class, right in front of Itza. "Good morning, Midoriya," Itza greeted in his usual formal tone. "Hey, Itza." Izuku replied cheerfully, rocking back and forth in his seat. "Long time no see. Where've you been?" Itza's eyebrow twitched. "We saw each other yesterday, Midoriya." "Huh, did we?" "I don't remember," Izuku said, smiling brightly. Itza frowned but couldn't help feeling that Izuku had grown on him over the years. "Have you decided which high schools you're applying to?" "Yeah, I've made my choice," Izuku responded. Itza's eyebrow twitched again. "What schools are those?" "I've applied to UA, Shikatsu, and CA. U.A, UA, and U.A, Izuku replied confidently. Itza's eyes twitched again. "Of course. What else could I expect?" "You're grumbling, that's new," Izuku teased. "Whatever. So what happened yesterday?" Itza asked. "You know about that?" Izuku responded, raising an eyebrow. "Everyone's talking about it." "What happened?" "Well, it wasn't my fault that thieves were shooting at me. I had to defend myself, Izuku shrugged. I heard you got involved in a hostage situation at the mall. Details, Izuku waved it off casually. Right, Itza muttered. Just then, the homeroom teacher entered with a stack of papers. He placed them on the desk and addressed the class. Good morning, class. Good morning, sir, the class chorused. Now that you're seniors, it's time to start seriously thinking about your futures, the teacher announced. Izuku smirked at the collective groan from his classmates. He leaned back in his chair, waiting for the teacher to continue. I'll be handing out printouts for your life course choices, the teacher said, gesturing to the stack. The class grumbled even more, causing the teacher to smile and shake his head. Who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes, don't you? And with that, chaos erupted. Students cheered, some banging their desks, others howling in excitement. Itza's eyebrows twitched violently. Izuku couldn't help but laugh silently, knowing that Itza, despite his stoic nature, probably wanted to scold everyone, but he wouldn't. All right, settle down. This is a top school, not a market, the teacher shouted, trying to calm the students down. Now that we've quieted down, let's move on. Hey, teach. Is anyone from this school applying to U.A? A student, whose name Izuku couldn't remember, asked. If I remember correctly, both Midoriya and Itza are applying for U.A, the teacher announced. That sparked a new round of discussion among the students. The two of them. I knew they'd applied to U.A. Doesn't UA have an extremely low acceptance rate? Someone asked. Yeah, I know that, but Itza is the sibling of Ingenium, and Midoriya? Well, he's just on another level, someone else replied. If anyone's going to get into UA, it's definitely those two, another student added. Suddenly, Itza stood up. Sir, could we please continue with the lesson? And so, the class resumed. Izuku found himself drifting off to sleep, as no one seemed to mind his usual behavior. After the bell rang signaling the end of class, Izuku said his goodbyes to Itza and decided it was time to head to his next destination, the HPSC headquarters. Although the headquarters was in a different city, Izuku had no trouble making the journey, thanks to his ability to teleport long distances. He slipped into an empty alley, hidden from any curious eyes. Interlocking his fingers, he slapped his palms together and vanished from the alley, reappearing beside the HQ in a split second. Walking inside, he was greeted by a middle-aged woman at the reception. She looked up from her screen and smiled warmly. Oh, Izuku, you're here. The president's been expecting you, the receptionist said. Over the years, Izuku had visited the HQ enough times that the staff had become familiar with him. Thanks, Izuku said, heading for the elevator. After pressing the button to the top floor, he leaned back against the wall, letting his mind wander as he waited. He reflected on his relationship with the president. For the first 3 years of his training, he hadn't met her at all. He'd been locked in isolation, his quirks studied and experimented on. Then one day, he got a call the president of the HPSC wanted to meet him. Since then, she had taken a keen interest in his progress. She'd check in monthly, asking about his quirk development and how he was managing his other training programs. Izuku had no idea what her ultimate goal was, but he was prepared for anything. Today, however, wasn't about progress reports. Today, he knew, was when he'd receive his punishment for breaking the law for the second time this month. Standing in front of the president's office, he knocked on the door. Come in, a voice called from inside. Izuku entered, his hand raised high in a cheerful greeting. Good afternoon, Grandma, he called out. A paperweight flew toward him, stopping just inches from his face. He didn't flinch or move from his exaggerated stance. Midoriya, behave, a stern male voice warned. Letting the paperweight fall into his hands, Izuku walked over to the president's desk and placed it carefully in front of her. Oh? Grandpa Yukimaru is here too? How lucky, he said, clearly amused. The president glared at him, her voice icy. Midoriya, do you have any idea what you did yesterday? Izuku shrugged casually. Self-defense. Self-defense, the president repeated under her breath before slamming her hands on the table. You walked into a mall that was surrounded by police, a mall that was a hostage situation. And you didn't stop there. You went in, joined the hostages, and then started a fight because they wouldn't give you candy. Flashback, the day before. Izuku wasn't easily interested in things, but one thing always caught his attention, analyzing heroes and villains. He loved studying their quirks, figuring out how to counter them or even improve on them. His ocular quirk was a massive help in this. His ocular quirk allowed him not only to see when a quirk was being activated but also to understand it to some degree just by observing someone. For instance, if someone had a wind-related quirk, Izuku could look at the person and understand that their quirk was related to wind. If they released wind from their hands, he could also learn the specifics of how it worked. However, this power came with two major drawbacks. The first was that it required direct eye contact, and he had to focus intensely. The second was that in a world filled with quirks, if his eyes remained uncovered for too long, he would be overwhelmed with constant analysis. This would cause debilitating migraines and headaches, a problem he'd first encountered at the age of 6. To counter this, the HPSC created special sunglasses with the darkest lenses possible. While others couldn't see through them, Izuku's quirk allowed him to see clearly, even through the thickest glass. That was another peculiarity of his ocular quirk. No matter how much he covered his eyes, he could always see through the barriers. Putting that aside, Izuku had just seen the debut of a pro hero with a wooden body on the news. He was quite impressed. If he remembered correctly, the hero's name was Tree Fighter. He had seen the hero entangle some villains in his wooden limbs, which stretched out like tree branches. His mother had sent him out for some groceries, and he was so absorbed in analyzing the new hero that he was snapped back to reality when something metallic was pressed against his head. Turning to his right, he saw a man wearing a black gas mask, holding a gun against the right side of his skull. He glanced to his left and noticed 3 more similarly dressed individuals pointing their guns at him. A separate group of people was sitting huddled together in the corner, staring at him in confusion. Huh? Did I just walk into a hostage situation? He muttered, realizing the gravity of the situation. What the hell, brat? How did you just stroll in here? The man holding the gun growled, his teeth clenched. I'm not sure, Izuku replied, taken aback. Had he really been so absorbed in his analysis that he didn't notice the hostage situation? Where were the police? And why hadn't they intervened? The man gritted his teeth. Whatever. Move to the corner and join the hostages. One wrong move and I'll blow your head off. Got it. Izuku rolled his eyes dramatically. All right. No need to get worked up. Smart ass little brat, you wanna die young. The man pressed the gun harder into Izuku's skull. Okay, I got it, Izuku muttered, before walking toward the other hostages and sitting down next to them. He noticed a woman holding her child, her face showing fear, desperation, and worry. Hey, who do you think will save us? Izuku smiled at her, trying to alleviate her anxiety. I heard Midnight often patrols this area, but it would be amazing if All Might came to save us. I heard he's in town. No talking, you little brat. The man yelled at him. Izuku's smile faded when he saw the child flinch, and the mother's efforts to comfort the boy. You should be quiet, you know. You're scaring the kid, Izuku said, frowning at the man. The gunman gritted his teeth. Do I look like I care? He yelled. Whatever, Izuku muttered, turning his attention toward the counter where the candy was. He looked at the only woman in the gang. Hey, could you hand me that box of candy? The woman in the black mask sneered at him. What did the boss say, brat? Keep it quiet. Izuku sighed, stood up, and casually walked over to the counter. That was enough to set the boss off. All right, I've had enough. Die, you son of a bitch. He screamed. The gang opened fire on Izuku, who was still facing away from them. Had he been facing them, they would have seen the smug grin on his face. Just as the bullets were about to hit him, they froze and hovered in the air. The villains were stunned. They fired more bullets, but the result was the same nothing. Yeah no, boss, Izuku slowly turned to face them, I was wondering when one of you would start shooting so I could call it self-defense. When Izuku fully faced them, he flashed a menacing grin, his eyes glowing brightly as he peered over his dark sunglasses. Hey, it's not my fault he was treating a kid badly. All the kid wanted was some candy, Izuku protested. Was it really the child or was it you? The president asked coldly. I was trying to calm the child down. Izuku defended himself. Do you realize how absurd you sound? What would have happened if one of the hostages had been injured? None of them got hurt. I saved them, you know. That doesn't matter. What you did was reckless. You may be strong, Izuku, but you're not invincible. If one shot had gone wrong, that child could have died. What you did was irresponsible. We didn't train you to flaunt your powers in public. We trained you so you could protect people. Your actions yesterday could have easily led to tragic consequences. Izuku's eyes dimmed as the reality of his rash decision sank in. Maybe he had been too hasty. He should have waited for the heroes to arrive. Now, as he thought through the situation, he realized there were countless ways he could have handled it without putting anyone's life at risk. It's good that you understand your mistake, Izuku. Your actions yesterday show that you still have a long way to go before becoming the kind of hero society expects. You used your quirk illegally in public. Do you realize how much I had to go through just to keep you out of government scrutiny? Pfft. I'm sure you used the self-defense excuse to get me out of it, Izuku replied, sounding unconvinced. The president's face flushed with frustration as she pinched the bridge of her nose. Ugh, she groaned. Why can't you just behave for once? Izuku laughed sarcastically. Come on, where's the fun in that? The president let out an exasperated sigh. Regardless, it's been decided you'll serve community service as punishment. Wait, what? But I thought you saved me. Izuku exclaimed. I may have gotten you out of it, but you still walked into a dangerous situation. Now, you either take the punishment, or become a vigilante. Fine, fine. Don't get your knickers in a twist, Izuku grumbled, sulking. The president's eyebrow twitched with annoyance. You'll be cleaning Dagobah Beach in Musutafa. You have 10 months to finish. If you fail, you'll be removed from the UA roster. Is that a challenge? Izuku smirked. No, just a punishment, she replied flatly. On the topic of UA, are you sure you don't want me to recommend you to them? It would save you from the hassle of the entrance exam. Izuku grinned. Come on, Grandma, where's the fun in that? Didn't All Might take the entrance exams too? It'd be my first step towards surpassing that old man. The president sighed deeply, the weight of Izuku's antics taking its toll. All right then. You're dismissed. Start cleaning that beach tomorrow. Got it, Izuku said before heading out. Izuku found himself on a train to Musutafa. Most would wonder why he didn't just teleport, but he enjoyed seeing the scenery, and teleportation had its limitations. While riding, he browsed the internet and saw there had been not one, but 2 villain attacks that day. Looks like the heroes are keeping busy, Izuku thought. Upon arrival, he checked his phone and followed the maps to Dagobah Beach. As he walked through the streets, a crowd gathered near a bridge, piquing his curiosity. He made his way over to see what was happening. A man with spiked blonde hair stood by a light pole, and Izuku, curious, slapped him on the back. Hey, skeleton man. What's going on here? Izuku called out. To his shock, the man started coughing up blood. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You alright, skeleton guy? Izuku asked, now concerned. Skeleton man, the man stammered, glaring at him. Wait. You're not a skeleton? You really looked like one, Izuku said, realizing his mistake. I'm not, kid. I'm perfectly fine, the man corrected, regaining his composure. Oh, sorry about that, Izuku muttered, moving on towards the crowd. Pushing through the throng, he reached the front, where Backdraft was using his quirk to manage the crowd. Kamui Woods, Death Arms, and MT Lady, all heroes who had gained recent popularity, were also present. What's going on? Izuku asked a civilian nearby. A villain took a middle schooler hostage, but the heroes aren't doing anything, the woman replied with a nervous glance. Izuku raised an eyebrow and scanned the scene. A sludge villain was holding a blonde boy hostage. The boy's quirk seemed to be explosions, constantly going off as he struggled to free himself. Explosion quirk. Where have I seen that before? Izuku thought, but nothing came to mind. Probably no one important. Izuku observed the situation. The boy's explosions were only making it harder for the heroes to intervene, and he was exhausting himself. If the boy just stopped, the heroes could probably take care of the situation easily. It's good that you recognize your mistake, Izuku. Your actions yesterday show you still have a long way to go before becoming the ideal hero society expects of you. You used your quirk publicly without authorization. Do you realize how much trouble I went through to keep you out of the government's scrutiny? I'm sure you just used the self-defense excuse to get me off the hook, Izuku retorted. The president blushed with anger and pinched the bridge of her nose. Ugh, she groaned in frustration. Why can't you just act normal for once? Izuku chuckled sarcastically. Come on, where's the fun in that? With a sigh of exasperation, the president finally spoke. Anyway, it's been decided that you'll do community service as punishment. What? But why? Didn't you get me out of this situation? Izuku questioned. I saved you, but you still walked straight into a dangerous situation, so take it or leave it. Otherwise, you could try being a vigilante, she replied. Izuku grumbled, pouting. Alright. No need to freak out. The president's eyebrow twitched with annoyance. You're going to clean Dagobah Beach in Musutafu. You've got 10 months to finish the job. If you don't, they'll remove your name from U.A.'s roster. Is that a challenge? Izuku asked, grinning. No, just a punishment, the president replied. By the way, are you sure you don't want me to recommend you to UA? It would save you from taking the entrance exam. Come on, Grandma, where's the fun in that? Didn't All Might also take the entrance exam? It'll be my first step in surpassing him, Izuku said confidently. The president sighed again. All right, you're dismissed. Start cleaning the beach tomorrow. Got it, Izuku said, leaving the room. Izuku found himself on a train to Musutafu. You might wonder why he wasn't teleporting there, mainly because he still enjoyed the scenery and traveling, despite his quirk having limitations. Sitting on the train, he browsed the internet and found out there had been 2 villain attacks on the same day. Looks like the heroes are getting quite busy these days, he thought. When he arrived, he opened his phone to find directions to Dagobah Beach. As he made his way through the streets, he noticed a crowd gathered around a bridge. Curious, he walked over to see what was happening. To his surprise, he saw a man with spiked blonde hair standing behind a light pole. Hey, skeleton man. What's going on here? Izuku asked, slapping the man on the shoulder. The man suddenly coughed up a lot of blood. Whoa. Are you alright? Izuku asked, concerned. Skeleton man. The man stuttered indignantly. Wait, you're not a skeleton. Izuku said, surprised. No, young man, I'm not, the man replied, steadying himself. Sorry about that, Izuku said, then pushed through the crowd to the front where heroes like Kamui Woods, Death Arms, and MT Lady were working to contain the situation. What's going on? Izuku asked a nearby civilian. A villain's holding a middle schooler hostage, and the heroes aren't doing anything, she replied, her voice trembling. Izuku raised an eyebrow. He looked forward and saw a sludge villain holding a blonde boy captive. The boy kept trying to use his quirk explosions to free himself but was only making things harder for the heroes. Explosion quirk, huh? Where have I seen that before? Izuku thought, frowning but not recalling any familiar face. He continued watching. The boy's explosions kept the heroes at bay, and the situation wasn't improving. If the boy stopped using his quirk, the heroes could help him out easily. Hey, Kamui, Izuku said as he approached the hero. Why aren't you helping? Kamui Woods frowned, shaking his head. Unfortunately, kid, none of our quirks are suited for this situation. Izuku pursed his lips. I can help. What? Kamui Woods looked back at him. My quirk would work perfectly here, Izuku said, casually scratching his ear. What's your quirk? Kamui asked. Space manipulation. Don't even think about it, kid. Death Arms warned. We can't let civilians get involved. Well, either I help and save the boy, or you let him die, Izuku responded without hesitation. Kamui Woods seemed to weigh the options in his mind. After a moment, he gave a short nod. Kid, are you sure you can handle this? It'll only take a second, Izuku said with a smirk. Kamui finally nodded to Backdraft. Let him pass. Are you sure? Backdraft asked. Yes. We don't have any other choice, Kamui replied. Backdraft hesitated, then removed the barrier, allowing Izuku to move forward. Is this kid serious? A civilian murmured. Why are they letting him walk into such danger? Another asked. Kamui Woods wiped the sweat off his forehead. Had he just made a terrible decision? I hope the kid lives up to his words, he thought. The man behind the light post, who had been silently observing, clenched his chest in pain. What was I thinking? I've put a kid in danger. Now someone else has to do my job. Izuku walked toward the sludge villain with confidence. His hands in his pockets and a smirk on his face, he moved like he knew exactly what he was doing. Halfway through, the villain noticed him. Huh? Another mead shield? Huh, come here, kid, I'll take care of you too. Izuku exhaled, looking calm. He held out his right arm. Suddenly, the sludge villain felt an invisible pull. What the? It said in confusion. Before anyone could react, The villain was pulled toward Izuku's hand and trapped in a sphere of space. Izuku casually walked back to Kamui Woods and handed him a bottle. "Here you go," he said, dusting his hands. "That's some crazy power," Death Arms commented. "Yeah, what is your quirk?" MT Lady asked. "It's space manipulation," Izuku replied, unbothered. "That's pretty cool," Death Arms said, crossing his arms. "If you ever want to intern with me, contact my agency. I'd gladly take you on as a sidekick," MT Lady offered, winking. Kamui snorted. "He'd fit better with my agency." "Not happening," MT Lady replied. "Of course, it is," Kamui argued. "Not happening," MT Lady insisted. "Of course, it is," Kamui replied, shaking his head. Amused by their banter, Izuku turned to Death Arms. "Hey, do you know which way to Dagobah Beach?" "That way," Death Arms pointed. "Thanks," Izuku said, skipping off cheerfully. Death Arms blinked, watching the kid leave. What an interesting kid. An hour later, Izuku found himself at Dagobah Beach. He expected the beach to be littered with trash, but it was far worse. The entire area looked like a dumping ground. Old appliances, broken cars, and bikes were scattered everywhere. "Well, looks like I have my work cut out for me," Izuku muttered. "All right, let's treat this as training for the UA entrance exams." Izuku Midoriya stood before the bathroom mirror, eyeing his reflection critically. He ran his fingers over his jawline, turning his head from side to side as though checking for something specific. He then tilted his head slightly and smiled. He looked good. He always looked good. Reaching for the sunglasses resting on the counter, he put them on and stepped out of the bathroom, heading towards the dining room where his mother was preparing breakfast. "Izu-chan. Breakfast is almost ready, take a seat," she called out, moving about the kitchen. After finishing breakfast, Izuku washed his hands and made the final adjustments to his bag. He was about to leave when his mother's voice stopped him. "Izu-chan. Wait." Izuku turned around, seeing her walk up to him. She extended her hand, offering something. He raised an eyebrow when he saw the item, a bracelet with the initials IM. "It's for good luck," his mother explained. With a bright smile, Izuku accepted the bracelet. "Thanks, Mom. I really like it." His mother smiled back but seemed a little uneasy. Izuku noticed her discomfort, puzzled by the way she was acting. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's just. Today is such a big day for you. I know you've been preparing for this your whole life. I'm not doubting you, but, are you ready?" Izuku nodded reassuringly. "Mom, I've got this. Don't worry about me." Her eyes filled with tears, and she clasped her hands together, smiling through them. "I know you're strong, Izu-chan. I'll always believe in you." Izuku returned her smile. "I know, Mom." With that, he walked out of their apartment, heading toward his destiny. This was the moment. This was it. The day Izuku had spent his life preparing for. It was his first step toward becoming a hero. Or rather, a licensed hero. Izuku Midoriya stood before the imposing gates of UA High Academy, the place he had always dreamed of attending. 4 massive buildings stood before him, their glass walls sleek and modern. Izuku could imagine the students inside, easily able to observe the outside world while remaining hidden from view, with glass walkways connecting the buildings. His dream school. It had always been his goal to attend this prestigious institution, the same school All Might had attended. And now the day had come. But first, he had to pass the most challenging entrance exam in the country. Izuku scoffed. As if an exam could stop him from achieving his dream. He was going to pass it. And that wasn't a guess. That was a certainty. Izuku Midoriya gazed at the stream of students entering UA. The varied school uniforms made the crowd look like a patchwork of colors, representing schools from all over Japan. He wore his Sumi private academy uniform. They were all here for the same reason, to pass the entrance exam and secure a future as a hero. But only 40 would succeed. Or more accurately, 35. Because 4 of those spots were already reserved for recommended students. And the last spot? That was his. At that moment, he felt a hand pat him on the shoulder. "I was wondering when you'd show up, Itza," Izuku said with a grin. "What, lost your way today?" "We were supposed to meet at gate 2, not gate 1, Itza replied in his typical dry tone. Izuku chuckled sheepishly. I guess I forgot where we were supposed to meet. If you'd been on time, we wouldn't be 10 minutes late, Aitsa scolded, gesturing with his hand as though making a point. Izuku shot him a deadpan look over his sunglasses. We still have over an hour before the exam starts. More like 50 minutes, Aitsa corrected. We're late. As model students of this academy, we must strive for punctuality. All right, Dad, Izuku teased. Let's go. Aitsa huffed, preparing to walk off when a loud, aggressive voice broke through the air. Get out of my way, extras. The two of them turned to see a boy with spiky, ash-blonde hair striding toward them. He wore a cream-colored jacket over a white t-shirt and black pants. His face bore a sneer, like a villain ready to take on the world. The blonde moved confidently, not bothering to adjust his course. He bumped into Izuku, who raised an eyebrow in confusion. Don't get in my way, extra, the blonde snapped. If it weren't for the fact they were standing outside UA, Izuku would have given this kid a lesson in respect. But he chose to remain calm, not letting this arrogant student spoil his chances of getting into UA without a hassle. But it looked like Aitsa had not gotten the message. What kind of behavior is that? Aitsa exclaimed, clearly upset. The blonde-haired student scoffed and glared at Aitsa. What did you say? Such a lack of manners, Aitsa continued, clearly frustrated, but Izuku stepped in with a calm gesture. Aitsa, it's fine. Let's not get worked up over this, Izuku said, keeping his voice cool. The blonde eyed Izuku with a frown. What did you say, you? His voice was still filled with irritation. Aitsa let out a breath, his posture relaxing a little. You're right, Midoriya. Let's not escalate this. As they began to walk forward, the blonde seemed to take a few steps forward, his voice laced with anger. What did you say? The blonde asked, clearly agitated. Izuku turned back, confused. Did you say something? The blonde growled, eyes narrowing. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku raised an eyebrow. That's me. Why? The blonde's expression shifted, a flash of recognition crossing his face. It's you. He muttered, before his face twisted into an angry snarl. You. Suddenly, the blonde lunged forward, his body tense and filled with rage. Izuku, however, was unfazed. He raised his hand calmly, fingers forming a subtle gesture, and just before the blonde could reach him, the movement paused. You're not getting anywhere with this, Izuku said in a calm, almost disinterested tone. The blonde struggled midair, now realizing he was completely stopped by some unseen force. You're the one, aren't you? You think you can come here and take what's mine? The blonde yelled with venom in his voice. Aitsa, shocked, turned to Izuku. Midoriya, do you know him? Izuku shook his head slightly. I don't know this guy at all. Are you sure? Aitsa asked, genuinely confused. Izuku simply gave a shrug, looking back at the blonde. I'm certain. But judging by his reaction, I think I might have unintentionally made an impression. The blonde ceded, his face red with fury as he shouted louder, his words laced with frustration. You ruined everything for me. As the crowd started to gather around them, murmurs began to ripple through the students. Some were confused, while others looked on, eager for a resolution to this tense standoff. Izuku's expression softened slightly as he observed the boy's overreaction. Look, whatever happened between us, it's not worth causing a scene over, right? The blonde snarled once more, but before anything further could happen, a voice rang out. Is everything all right here? The crowd turned toward the entrance of UA where a striking figure stood. Ms. Midnight, the well-known heroine, had arrived. Her presence commanded attention. She was dressed in her hero costume, and as always, she had a confident yet mysterious aura. Her calm but assertive voice cut through the tension in the air. Izuku, Aitsa, and many of the students in the crowd blinked in surprise, a few of the boys blushing from the sudden appearance of the well-known heroine. Her arrival shifted the atmosphere, and for the moment, all eyes turned away from the confrontation, drawn to the professional yet captivating presence she brought with her. She was truly embodying her persona as the provocatively bold heroine, the one who set the standard for all others. It's her, the daring heroine, Ms. Midnight. One of the boys, clearly excited, announced with energy. Era. So you kids are familiar with me. Ms. Midnight teased in a voice that seemed too alluring for public spaces. How naughty. But I do enjoy it. A whip materialized in her hands, and she cracked it loudly against the ground. The provocative heroine then walked toward the green-haired boy and the still suspended blonde-haired boy. If you'd asked Ms. Midnight, she'd say it was quite the amusing scene. Under different circumstances, she might have enjoyed the spectacle for a bit longer, but given the location U.A.'s entrance exam she decided to step in. The green-haired boy, much to her amusement, had glanced at her for a moment, but quickly refocused on the blonde-haired boy. Midnight approached Izuku and stood beside him, leaning in so that her presence was undeniable. Her voice dropped to a teasing tone as she said, "You do realize, young man, that using your quirk without permission could get you in serious trouble." Itza rushed forward in a flurry of concern, startling her enough to make her step back. He bowed deeply before Midnight, apologizing on Izuku's behalf. "Ms. Midnight, please forgive my friend for not following the rules. I will make sure." "Itza," Izuku interrupted, his voice sharp. "Why are you apologizing for something that wasn't our fault?" Itza gritted his teeth, whispering urgently in Izuku's ear, "Midoriya, I'm trying to smooth things over here. Please, don't make this worse." Izuku's eyes narrowed, his tone cold. "You want to take the fall for this wannabe hero? I'm not like you, Itza. I'm not letting anyone walk all over me. Midoriya, this isn't the time." All right, boys." Midnight interjected, clapping her hands together. "As exciting as this little drama is, I'm sure you all have an exam to get to. Greenie, why don't you let Blondie down?" Izuku's frustration was evident, but he sighed. If he could, he'd have the blonde tossed out of the exam entirely. Sure, he could get him into trouble, but it would be petty and Izuku didn't want to resort to such tactics. With a scoff, the green-haired boy retracted his quirk, letting the blonde fall unceremoniously to the ground. Midnight clapped her hands happily. "See? Was that so hard?" Izuku muttered, "No." He couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed for having 6 eyes, which allowed him to pick up on things like Ms. Midnight's unspoken thoughts. It was all a bit much. Midnight, crossing her arms below her chest, whether intentionally or not, Izuku couldn't quite tell, glanced at the blonde. "And you, young man, I'm sure you understand where you went wrong." The blonde's face shifted between shock and irritation before settling on anger. He scowled as he got to his feet, dusting off his backside and trying to appear nonchalant as he shoved his hands in his pockets. Midnight's voice held a stern edge. "We're here to become heroes, not to act like children. Got it?" The blonde only sneered. "Am I understood?" Midnight asked again, her tone sharper. The blonde grunted, his face still set in a scowl. "Yeah. No. Am I understood?" Midnight's voice rose just a little. "Yes." The response was begrudging but clear. "Good." Midnight cracked her whip once more. "Now, what are you waiting for? This isn't some dramatic scene from a movie. Get moving to the exam." The sound of her whip startled the group into realizing that they only had a short time left before the exam began. Students scrambled toward the UA building, Itza being one of them, expecting Izuku to follow him. But Izuku remained calm, walking at a leisurely pace. "Hey, Greenie." Izuku stopped and turned back. "Yes. What's your name?" Midnight asked with a knowing smile, noticing how hard he was trying to avoid glancing downward. "Izuku Midoriya." Midnight's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Midoriya, you say?" she murmured, before making her way toward him, her steps deliberate. Once she was beside him, she leaned in and planted a soft kiss on his right cheek. "That's for good luck, all right," she said, her voice playful before she started walking away, her hips swaying with every step. "Make sure you pass, Midoriya. I'll be keeping a very close eye on you." Izuku stood still, completely baffled by the interaction. What just happened? He muttered to himself, taking out his handkerchief to wipe the faint mark left on his cheek. "Pervert," a deadpan voice spoke from behind him. Izuku quickly turned around, his guard slipping for a moment as he hadn't noticed someone approach. He raised an eyebrow when he noticed a girl with purple hair staring at him, her expression scrutinizing. She wore a green blazer and pants, and her most distinct feature was the long earlobes with jacks at the end. "What?" Izuku asked, frowning. "You're one of those guys, aren't you? The type who gets excited by women like her." Izuku let out an impressed whistle. "Wow, you just judged 2 people without even speaking to them. Do you realize we're not stuck in the past anymore?" The purple-haired girl rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Whatever. People like you are exactly why women like her exist." Izuku blinked as she walked past him. This was turning out to be a weird day, wasn't it? He trailed behind her with his hands in his pockets. "For your information, I'm not a pervert," Izuku said, walking behind her. And while she may act flirtatious, it's her choice, isn't it? Isn't that what people like feminists say about actions they don't always agree with? Izuku added with a smirk. The purple-haired girl spun around and began walking backward, glaring at him with her hands on her hips. Don't drag feminism into this. You have no idea what it's like for women. Huh. Izuku raised his hand above his eyes as if searching for something. Women? I don't see one. The purple-haired girl growled. Women like her are the reason we're constantly sexualized. Because of women like her, everyone thinks that female heroes are just there for their looks, nothing more. Izuku shook his head. You're mistaken. Midnight has been one of the strongest advocates for women's rights. Especially back when female heroes were seen as sidekicks. Her battle against the HPSC for costume regulations is well known and respected globally. The purple-haired girl scoffed in disgust. Of course it's praised. All they care about is seeing some skin and nothing more. Deciding not to argue any further, the purple-haired girl quickened her pace. Izuku smiled, knowing she had a point. Maybe Midnight fought those battles thinking it would help society. After all, there were male heroes who went topless, so why couldn't female heroes? But in the end, much of the praise had come from men, and he knew exactly why. His mind wandered to Midnight's reaction to his last name. She had seemed to recognize the name Midoriya, but he didn't understand why. Maybe she knew his mother's name. His mom had been a model and had some connections to people in the hero community. She was a well-known figure, so Midnight could have made that connection. Soon, Izuku arrived in front of the room where the written exam would be held. Stepping inside, he scanned the room for his friend, the blue-haired boy. He spotted him sitting at the top of the room and quickly made his way over. Taking the seat next to him, he set his bag down on the desk. Where've you been? His friend asked with a hiss. I got stopped by Ms. Midnight for some reason, Izuku replied as he took out his writing board, pens, and pencils, organizing them neatly. Itza raised an eyebrow. Ms. Midnight? What for? Izuku's hand moved to the spot where Midnight had kissed his cheek, but he shook off the thought. I have no idea. Itza gave him a suspicious look, and Izuku returned a sheepish smile. Just then, a figure entered the room through a separate door and made their way to the podium at the front of the semi-circular rows of desks. The figure's face was covered by what appeared to be a tan gas mask shaped vaguely like a horse. A cowboy hat sat on his head with a thick metallic plate in the front. He wore a large red cloak over a plain black tank top, with white armor strapped to the right side of his body. A brown belt with a gun holster was strapped around his waist, and his pants were light brown and baggy. Overall, the figure looked like a classic cowboy. Makes sense that he's the one overseeing this exam, Izuku muttered. Itza, who had overheard, nodded. Snipe was known for his sharp vision, and who else could be better suited to supervise an exam with thousands of students in such a large room? Izuku glanced at his friend, noting that Itza's arms were crossed, and his fingers tapped nervously against his forearms. Izuku chuckled inwardly, seeing Itza nervous wasn't something that happened every day. Good morning, examines, the figure greeted. I hope most of you know who I am, but for those who don't, I'm Snipe. I'll be your invigilator for the written portion of the exam. Now, you'll all be receiving your question papers and answer sheets. Izuku raised an eyebrow, impressed, as the test papers shot out from the top of the desks like a machine in action. He had expected someone to distribute the papers, but then again, this was UA, so anything could happen. Nothing about this place was ordinary. Before you begin, the pro hero said, take a look at your desks. You will notice a drawer with a red LED light on it. Izuku followed the instructions and noticed what the hero was referring to. When you're done with the exam, you'll need to submit your answer sheets into that drawer, the pro hero continued. The LED will turn green after an hour, signaling that you can submit your papers. You have 3 hours to finish the exam. After that, you'll have 3 more minutes to put your paper in the drawer. Once those 3 minutes pass, the LED will turn red, and you won't be able to submit your paper anymore. I advise you to submit it on time. And one more thing, the pro hero paused for emphasis, don't cheat. Don't talk to anyone, don't whisper, and don't do anything foolish. If I catch you even making a sound, you'll be disqualified. Understood? The room was silent, no one asking questions or even speaking. The pro hero nodded. You may start now. The sound of wrappers being torn open filled the room. Izuku casually unwrapped his test and started scanning the questions. These don't seem too tough for the so-called hardest exam, Izuku mused. Or maybe I'm overestimating. But then again, he wasn't sure. Thanks to his enhanced perception from the six eyes, his brain processing power had increased drastically, allowing him to grasp even the most difficult subjects with ease. During his time with the HPSC, he was made to study subjects at a master level for an experiment. Within a month, he had mastered aerodynamics physics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. It only took him an hour to finish the exam. Looking down, he saw that the drawer's LED had turned green. He opened it, placed his paper inside, and shut it quietly. As he looked up, he noticed the pro hero, Snipe, staring at him. He raised a hand. Yes, examinee 7112. Snipe asked. I've finished the exam. Can I leave now? Sure, just make sure you're back here in 2.5 hours, Snipe said with a casual shrug. However, he was far from indifferent. He was surprised the boy had finished so quickly. Either he had skipped questions, or there was more to him than met the eye. As Izuka made his way down the stairs, he could feel the eyes of the other examens on him. He smirked inwardly. Poor guys, fighting for a spot at this school. He soon found himself in the cafeteria, taken aback by how massive the place was. While walking around, he spotted Lunch Rush working behind the counter. Looks like everyone here is a hero, he thought. He walked up to the chef hero, ordered a bowl of katsudon, and a few sweets. Lunch Rush smiled as he handed over the meal. Izuka found an empty seat, devoured his food, and then decided to take a quick nap. 2.5 hours later, Izuka returned to the same room where the written exam had taken place. Itsuo was seated next to him, sitting rigidly with his fingers tapping on his knees. At that moment, a notable pro hero entered and stood at the front of the room. The hero was tall, slender, with long blonde hair styled into a tuft, and a small brown mustache. His costume consisted of a black jacket with a high, studded collar, matching black pants, knee-high boots, and tan shoulder pads. His red belt and elbow pads were also studded, and he wore fingerless gloves. His neck was obscured by a directional speaker, and he had a pair of headphones with Hage written on them and orange-tinted glasses. Hey there, kids. Give me a hey, the pro hero shouted energetically. Izuku immediately yelled, yee, while enthusiastically raising his fist. However, no one else joined in. This might have embarrassed most people, but Izuka was anything but normal. Itsu's eyebrows twitched beside him, clearly disapproving. Of course, Midoriya had to act childish at such an important moment. Wow, what a lively crowd, the pro hero exclaimed, brushing off the awkward silence. You all should learn to relax like that kid over there. He pointed at Izuku. Now, give me a yeah. Yeah. Izuka fist pumped again. But once more, no one else followed his lead. Well, for those who don't know me, I'm Present Mike, the pro hero introduced himself. And I'm here to explain the practical portion of the exam. With that, a presentation appeared on the screen behind him, showing various exam sites across the room. There were 7 sites, each labeled with a different letter of the alphabet. Izuka raised an eyebrow in surprise as papers began spilling out from the desks like they were being printed from a machine. He had expected someone to hand them out, but then again, this was UA, and nothing about this place was ever normal. Before you start writing, let me explain something, the pro hero's voice rang out. Look down at your desk, and you'll see a drawer with a red LED on it. Izuka followed the instructions and saw the drawer the pro hero mentioned. Once you finish your exam, place your answer sheets in that drawer, the pro hero continued. The LED will turn green after an hour, signaling that it's time to submit your paper. You have 3 hours to finish the exam, and then 3 extra minutes to put your paper in the drawer. After the 3 minutes are up, the LED will turn red, and you'll no longer be able to submit it. So, make sure you are on time. Oh, and one more thing, the pro hero paused for effect, don't cheat. Don't talk to anyone. Don't do anything stupid. If I hear any whispering or see you talking, you're disqualified. Got it. Silence filled the room as everyone nodded. The pro hero gave a brief nod and then added, you can begin now. The sound of papers being opened filled the room. Izuka casually opened his exam paper and glanced over the questions. For something billed as the toughest exam, these questions seem pretty straightforward, Izuka thought. Or maybe they're not. It was hard to tell. After all, with his enhanced perception from the 6 eyes, his brain processed information at an accelerated rate, making studying easier for him. Back when he was at the Hero Prodigy School, HPSC, they had challenged him with master-level subjects as an experiment, and within a month, He had mastered topics like aerodynamics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. It took him only an hour to finish the test. He glanced down and noticed that the drawer's LED was glowing green. He quickly slid the paper inside before closing it. As he stood up, he noticed that Snipe was watching him. Izuku raised his hand. Yes, examinee 7112. Snipe asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm finished with my exam. May I leave now? Sure. Be back in 2.5 hours for the next part, Snipe replied with a nonchalant shrug. Izuku walked down the stairs, noticing the surprised expressions from his fellow examins. He smirked to himself. They're all so eager to get in, fighting for a position. Meanwhile, I'm already done. He headed straight to the cafeteria, impressed by the sheer size of the place. As he wandered around, he saw Lunch Rush behind the counter. Guess everyone here is a hero, huh? Izuku thought. He approached the chef and ordered a bowl of katsudon and some sweets. Lunch Rush smiled and handed him his lunch. After finishing his meal, Izuku found an empty seat and decided to take a nap. 2.5 hours later, Izuku was back in the same room where the written exams had taken place. Itza, sitting next to him, was nervously tapping his fingers on his knees. A prominent pro hero then entered the room and stood at the podium. The pro hero was tall, lean, and had long, spiky blonde hair with a small mustache. He wore a black jacket with a high collar, studded shoulder pads, a red belt, and fingerless gloves. His headphones had Hage written on them, and his shades were tinted orange. All right, listen up, everyone. Give me a hey. He. Izuku shouted, pumping his fist with enthusiasm. But no one else joined in. Izuku didn't mind, it was typical. Itza's face twitched in embarrassment. Of course, Midoriya has to act so childish at such a serious moment. Now, who am I? The pro hero boomed. I'm present, Mike. He declared loudly. I'm here to explain the practical exam. A large screen behind him lit up, displaying images of the various testing sites. There were 7 sites, each represented by a different letter of the alphabet. The details on this screen are the same as the ones on your instruction sheets, Present Mike continued. Each of you will be assigned to a different site. Students from the same school won't be placed together to keep things fair. The screen shifted to show 4 different types of robots, 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer, and... Izuku's attention peaked at the last one, no points were listed for that robot. Present Mike continued, the cities you'll be placed in will be filled with villain bots, ranging from 1-pointers to 3-pointers. The number of bots at each site will vary, but here's the deal, a 1-pointer earns you 1 point, a 2-pointer earns you 2 points, and so on. You have 10 minutes to collect as many points as possible by taking down these bots with your quirks. And don't even think about attacking your fellow examins. That's an instant disqualification. Itza raised his hand, looking concerned. Yes, candidate 7111. Present Mike asked. I noticed there's a robot with 3 question marks for its name. This seems like an error. Such mistakes shouldn't happen in a prestigious school like UA. Izuku face-palmed internally, realizing that Itza's obsession with perfection had taken over again. Wow, you're a real stickler for details, huh? Present Mike chuckled. But he makes a good point. The screen zoomed in on the robot with the question marks. The symbols flickered away, replaced by the number, 50%. As for this bot, Present Mike explained, it represents a real-life scenario. When you graduate, you'll likely be working as a sidekick to a pro hero, and sometimes, you'll face villains you can't fight. In those cases, you're ordered to save civilians, not engage the villain. If you disobey that order, you'll not only lose your hero license, but you'll also face lawsuits. This bot is a representation of such a scenario. There was a quiet pause as the students absorbed the information. If you attack this bot, you'll lose 50% of your points and be banned from the entrance exam for 3 years, Present Mike added with a serious tone. The room went silent, and most of the students decided it was best not to approach that bot during the exam. Got it? If you understand, give me a yeah. Yeah. Izuku shouted, raising his fist in the air. This time, the response was better. All right then. Let's get started. Plus ultra. Plus ultra. The students finally echoed, their energy matching Present Mike's enthusiasm. Izuku smiled to himself as the students began to leave for their designated sites, ready for the next challenge. 20 minutes later, Izuku Midoriya found himself standing before a vast city surrounded by towering walls. Despite hearing about U.A's enormous campus, he couldn't help but marvel at how immense it truly was. They had been transported by bus, which made it even more impressive. Izuka had been assigned to City A, while Aitsa was placed in City E. After going through the formalities, they were asked to change into their combat outfits, as UA termed them. Izuka wore a fitted short-sleeve shirt that clung to his body, showcasing the muscles and abs he'd worked hard to develop over the years. He paired it with tan baggy training pants, a black belt, and sturdy martial arts boots. Aitsa, on the other hand, opted for a body-hugging blue shirt with white stripes and matching pants that ended just above his knees, his uniform from Sumi Academy. After wishing each other good luck, they boarded separate buses. Having seen underground training bases used by the HPSC, Izuka thought they were impressive, but nothing compared to UA. Even the HPSC's facilities felt small in comparison. And there were still 6 other cities under U.A's jurisdiction. How large could UA possibly be? Where did they get the resources to build something so vast? He did a few stretches to loosen up before the exam started. And begin. Present Mick's voice boomed. Izuka wasted no time. Harnessing cursed energy to enhance his legs, he sprinted toward the city's gate, kicking up a cloud of dust as he left a trail of stunned examiners behind him. What are you all waiting for? Present Mike urged. Follow his lead. Go go go. The other examines quickly sprung into action, but what they saw next left them stunned. Nearly every villain bot in sight had already been destroyed, their mechanical parts scattered across the streets. What the heck happened here? One of the examines yelled, unable to comprehend the destruction. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out, sending mechanical debris flying through the air. We can't let him take all the points. Another examinee shouted, urging others to act. They scrambled to find any remaining villain bots still intact. Meanwhile, Izuka was thoroughly enjoying himself. It had been ages since he could let loose like this. Even during his HPSC training, he had to hold back to avoid accidentally harming the trainers. But these robots? They were fair game. As he surveyed the city, he spotted his first target, a 3-pointer. The robot's ruby red eyes locked onto him, but before it could react, Izuka was already in front of it. With a swift motion, he extended his arm and executed a powerful lariat, knocking one of the robot's shoulder guns clean off and hitting a 2-pointer in the process, destroying it. Izuka grinned at how fragile the bots were. He grabbed the body of the 3-pointer he'd just downed and hurled it at another, taking it out with ease. Standing tall, he looked ahead and saw more robots waiting for him. Rolling his shoulders with a smile, he said, "This is going to be a blast," before charging toward them. He appeared in front of a 1-pointer, launching a roundhouse kick that took down both the 1-pointer and a 2-pointer. Next, he jumped over a 3-pointer, landing between its shoulder guns. With ease, he ripped them off and threw them at 2 incoming 1-pointers, taking them down. Using the body of the destroyed 3-pointer as a glove, he punched through 3 more 2-pointers, smashing them to pieces in seconds. Finally, he hurled the bot's remains at a 1-pointer, finishing it off. Izuka moved with lightning speed, appearing above another 3-pointer and delivering a dropkick that shattered it into fragments. He continued dismantling robots at breakneck speed. Every bot that crossed his path was reduced to scrap, his grin growing wider with each victory. After another few minutes, he landed for a brief respite, but as soon as he did, he found himself surrounded by 10 robots. 3 3-pointers, 3 2-pointers, and 4 1-pointers. Izuka's lips curled into a smirk as the robots readied their weapons. The 1-pointers aimed their machine guns, the 2-pointers prepared their laser cannons, and the 3-pointers aimed their shoulder-mounted guns at him. In an instant, all weapons fired, but none of the bullets or lasers hit their target. Izuka had already jumped into the air, flipping upside down. He grabbed his wrist with his other hand and pointed his palm toward the center of the circle formed by the bots. To the surprise of the robots, they suddenly stopped firing, and a moment later, they were all drawn toward the center of the circle and collided with each other in a chaotic crash. Izuka flipped again and landed gracefully on the ground. He flexed his left shoulder and sighed, "Oh, nothing compares to this." He turned to the left, spotting more robots down the street. With a joyful smile, he pounced on them, tearing through them with gleeful abandon. As he continued to dismantle robot after robot, Izuka lost all sense of time. He felt a sensation he hadn't experienced before. He felt liberated. Liberated to fully utilize his strength. Liberated to unleash his speed. Liberated to tap into his cursed energy. Liberated to wield his abilities without restraint, doing whatever he wished. In an instant, he appeared in front of a 2-pointer, winding his right arm back. His fist clenched tightly. Just milliseconds before his punch struck the robot, he infused it with cursed energy. Black flash. Izuku whispered under his breath as his fist collided with the robot. The impact was so powerful that it sent shockwaves down the street. The robot was flung backward at incredible speed, crashing into another one. The pair then collided with another, and the chain continued until they plowed through a building, only stopping when they barreled into the next street. Then, something caught his eye. A robot hovered above a spiky, blonde-haired boy, who appeared to be lost in thought, his expression comically absent. When Izuku saw the robot raise its arm to strike, he acted without hesitation. With a burst of speed, he appeared above the two-pointer, yanked its arm out of its socket, and used it as a weapon, slamming it down on the robot, destroying it in the process. He landed gracefully in front of the boy, who was still pacing in circles. "Hey, you all right?" Izuku called out. "We," the boy responded, his tone playful and detached. Izuku placed a hand on his chin. "Looks like quirk backlash. I'll take you to safety." With that, he picked up the boy and cradled him under his arms. Performing the snake hand seal, Izuku appeared in front of the main gate and gently set the boy down. Using his quirk, he then perched himself atop a building, crouching on the railing as he surveyed the scene below. Several examines were scrambling to take down the remaining robots. "Just how many of these bots are there?" he muttered to himself, before shrugging and getting comfortable. "Who cares? I've already racked up 170 points. I can just relax and enjoy the show." In a dimly lit room filled with numerous television screens, several figures were closely monitoring the examine's progress. Among them were Midnight, Snipe, and Present Mike. "Quite the lively batch we have this year, huh?" Snipe remarked, his eyes on one of the screens showing a boy with multiple arms standing triumphantly atop a building. "True, some of them have pretty flashy quirks," Present Mike commented, glancing at a blue-haired boy dashing around and obliterating robots with powerful kicks. "Hey, isn't that the Itza kid?" "Yeah, that's Tensei's brother," a figure with a large excavator-shaped helmet responded. "Heh, that kid seems a bit too strict for my liking," Mike quipped. Some of these kids are quite creative," said a humanoid figure made of cement, observing a girl with brown hair and round cheeks, another girl with purple hair and long earlobes, and a near-invisible girl. "Impressive, indeed," Snipe agreed, watching the screens. The brown-haired girl was using her quirk to manipulate previously destroyed robots, while the purple-haired girl utilized her ear-like quirk to create vibrations that caused damage. The invisible girl had located the stop buttons on the robots and was using them to rack up points. "We've got a real powerhouse here," a muscular figure with silver hair remarked, pointing at a screen displaying a blonde boy standing triumphantly on a pile of destroyed robots, his face radiating intensity. The excavator-helmeted figure looked at the screen, his face filled with concern. "That boy, he looks like he has anger issues," he muttered, his voice tinged with worry. "That's the kid causing a scene at the gate, right?" Mike asked, looking toward Midnight. "Yeah, one of them," Midnight replied. "But he's definitely going to require some work. If I didn't know better, I'd assume he's a villain." Guess he's your responsibility, Vlad," Snipe remarked, getting an exasperated sigh from the silver-haired hero. "Why does it have to be me?" Vlad King groaned. "Well, none of us want Izuwa to die this year," Midnight said dryly. "Eh? Why?" Mike asked, clearly confused. "Because he's definitely getting this one," a rat-like creature sitting in Midnight's lap piped up cheerfully, pointing at one of the screens. All eyes turned toward the screen, and it became clear what Midnight meant. The camera focused on a spiky-haired, green-eyed boy wearing sunglasses. His training outfit was unusual, hinting at a martial arts background. But what really caught the attention of the watching heroes was how the boy effortlessly destroyed robot after robot, making them appear fragile despite their formidable design. The boy was the first to sprint toward the gates when the exam started, the rat-like creature excitedly noted. He covered the distance faster than anyone else, even beating Ingenium's brother. "So, speed-based quirk," Mike mused before realizing something. "But no, that can't be right. The way he's taking down those robots, it's too easy. Strength, then," Mike suggested. As he continued to destroy one robot after another, he lost track of time. There was something unfamiliar, something he had never expected to feel. He felt liberated. Liberated to use his strength. Liberated to use his speed. Liberated to use his cursed energy. Liberated to unleash his powers as much as he desired. Appearing right in front of a two-pointer, he pulled his right arm back, forming a fist. With a swift motion, he propelled it forward. Just moments before the fist collided with the robot, he infused it with cursed energy. Black flash. Izuku muttered under his breath as his fist hit its target. The punch landed with such force that it sent shockwaves through the street. The robot was launched into the air, faster than a race car, crashing into another robot. That robot collided with another, and then the chain continued, creating a pile of robots that crashed through a building, only to continue their path into another street. His gaze shifted, catching sight of something else. A robot hovered above a spiky-haired boy with a goofy expression on his face. When Izuku saw the robot raise its arm, he acted immediately. Appearing above it in a burst of speed, he grabbed the raised arm and yanked it off. He then used the detached arm to smash the robot, taking it out in the process. He landed in front of the boy, who was now walking in circles. "Hey, are you all right?" Izuku asked. "We." The boy responded in a dazed tone. Izuku furrowed his brow. Looks like a quirk malfunction. I'll get you to safety." He scooped the boy up, holding him under his arms, then formed a hand seal and appeared at the gate. Gently setting the boy down, he disappeared again, this time standing on the roof of a nearby building. Looking down, he saw other examines scrambling to find robots to destroy. "How many of these bots are there?" he murmured to himself before shrugging and sitting down on the roof's railing. "Who cares? I've already got 170 points. I'll just stay here and enjoy the show." Inside a dark room filled with monitors, several figures watched the exam unfold. Among them were Midnight, Snipe, and Present Mike. "This year's candidates are quite lively, huh?" Snipe remarked as he observed a boy with multiple arms standing atop a building. "True," Present Mike noted, watching a blue-haired boy run at incredible speed, delivering powerful kicks to robots. "That kid looks like the Itza brother, right?" "Yeah, that's Tensei's sibling," a figure wearing a large excavator-shaped helmet confirmed. "Huh. He seems a bit too strict," Mike commented. "There are also some creative types," said a figure made of cement, pointing at a screen showing a brown-haired girl using her quirk on already destroyed robots, a purple-haired girl utilizing her earlobes to create vibrations, and an almost invisible girl activating robots' stop buttons to gather points. "Impressive indeed," Snipe commented. A muscular, silver-haired figure pointed at another screen. "Here's one with a lot of potential," he said. The figure in the excavator-shaped helmet looked at the screen, his eyes wide in horror as he watched a blonde boy standing triumphantly atop a pile of robot parts. "That boy looks like he has a lot of pent-up anger," Midnight said with concern. "Is this the kid causing trouble at the gate?" Mike asked. "One of them," Midnight replied. "He'll probably need the most attention. If I didn't know any better, I'd think he was some kind of villain." "Guess it's your responsibility then, Vlad," Snipe said, making the silver-haired hero sigh. "Why can't Izoa take him?" Vlad groaned. "Well, we don't want Izoa to drop dead this year, do we?" Midnight remarked dryly. "Eh? Why?" Mike asked, genuinely confused. "Because he's definitely getting the green-haired one," Nizu, the rat-like creature sitting on Midnight's lap, piped up with a grin. Everyone's attention shifted to the screen Nizu pointed to, and they all immediately understood what Midnight meant. The camera focused on a spiky-haired, green-eyed boy wearing sunglasses, his attire hinting at martial arts training. He effortlessly weaved through the swarm of villain bots, destroying them as though they were made of paper. "The boy was the first to leap forward when the exam began," Nizu explained excitedly. "He reached the gates faster than anyone else, even surpassing Ingenium's brother." "Could it be a speed-based quirk?" Mike asked, but as the boy continued to dismantle robots with ease, he had his doubts. "That doesn't seem likely," Vlad said, shaking his head. "He's destroying the robots far too easily for someone with just a speed-based quirk." "So, what does he have?" Mike asked. Nizu didn't answer right away, instead watching intently. "His quirk's called space manipulation." "Space manipulation?" A figure wearing a trench coat and a mask like a dinosaur head, ectoplasm, asked. "Like the prison hero?" "I don't think so," Nizu replied, his eyes glued to the screen. "How many villain points does he have?" Mike asked. 100 villain points, Nizu replied, excitement glinting in his eyes. 100 points. Mike exclaimed in shock. "But All Might had the highest villain points, right?" "Yes," Nizu nodded. "But this kid surpassed All Might by 3 points with 4 minutes to spare. However, he still has to beat All Might's record for hero points." "Still, that's impressive," Ectoplasm said, clearly impressed. I don't like him. A voice suddenly came from a figure in the corner of the room. They all turned to see a man with messy black hair and dark circles under his eyes, wrapped in a yellow sleeping bag. Oh please, Aizawa, you don't like anyone, Midnight replied, rolling her eyes. It doesn't make sense, Aizawa muttered, his expression unreadable but his brow furrowed. The kid's movements are too precise. He's eliminating robots with too much efficiency. Something doesn't sit right with me. Mike waved it off. Aren't you judging too harshly? This kid seems impressive. I don't mean it like that, Aizawa said. Look at the blonde-haired boy. He's all over the place relying on his quirk too much. The blue-haired kid's not much better, erratic, and uncoordinated. These kids show signs of inexperience. The room fell silent as everyone considered Aizawa's words. Now look at the green-haired kid, Aizawa continued. Do you see any sloppiness in his actions? Any hesitation or errors? They all watched the boy, his hands slicing through robots with surgical precision. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Even when surrounded by dozens of robots, he kept fighting, never faltering. Midnight shifted uncomfortably in her seat as she watched the boy effortlessly defeat robot after robot. Nizo grinned widely, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Well, that's another 70 points for him, Nizo commented, still gleaming with pride. Mike whistled in admiration. 70 points with just one punch. He looked over at Midnight, who was flushed and absent-mindedly rubbing her legs together. You all right there, Kayama? Oh, I'm perfectly fine, Midnight purred with a sadistic smile. In fact, I've never felt better. Aizawa sighed, rolling his eyes. He knew exactly what was running through his teammate's mind. If that green-haired kid was to be his responsibility, Aizawa would have to keep him as far away from Midnight as possible. The team continued to watch as the boy moved swiftly, taking down another robot and saving a fellow candidate in the process. Heroic enough for you? Snipe asked, clearly impressed. Add that to his already impressive villain points, Nizo said, still excited. How much does he have? Snipe asked, intrigued. Nizo glanced at the tablet in his hands. After the latest tally, he's got 186 points. Just 12 shy of breaking your record, All Might. The rat-like humanoid glanced toward the large figure seated in a corner of the room. The figure didn't respond. It merely fixed its gaze on the screen, particularly focused on a specific green-haired boy. Damn. Midnight cursed, fully understanding the weight of the situation. The cement-skinned hero rubbed his forehead. 186 points in only 7 minutes. To come this close to All Might's total just with villain points. What are they feeding kids these days? He glanced over at the man in the excavator mask, now down on all fours. Are you okay there, power loader? My bots. Cementos. My poor robots. The pro hero cried in despair. Well, looks like the kid broke one of us, Snipe joked, eyeing the distressed hero. The group watched in awe as the boy grabbed the blonde he had saved and suddenly vanished from view. What? Ectoplasm blinked in disbelief. He's over there, Cementos pointed toward a screen showing the entrance to City A. They saw the green-haired boy set the blonde down and then disappear again. This time, he's up there, Ectoplasm observed, pointing to another screen that showed the boy standing on the edge of a building. Mike scratched his head, is that really something space manipulation can do? Technically, yes, Nizo explained, by compressing space at one point and expanding it at another, one can move from one place to another. But does space manipulation give him super strength or speed? Aizawa frowned, skeptical. In theory, no, Nizo said, his paws raised in excitement. But, let's not forget the final test. Mike exclaimed. Is it time already? We didn't even check on the other students' performance. Nizo shrugged. We'll look at that later. Mike, if you would. Present Mike grabbed the microphone and spoke into it. 2 minutes left, he called out. With that, Nizo pressed a red button. Izuku, from his spot on the building, observed as the other examines scrambled to find robots to destroy. 2 more minutes, Present Mick's voice echoed across the city. Wait, already? That was fast. Izuku blinked as he felt the ground shake. He turned and saw a massive robot, towering over the multi-story buildings, emerge from the ground. What the hell is UA doing with something like that? Izuku muttered, staring at the colossal robot. It began marching toward where the majority of the candidates were gathered. Izuku looked down and saw the students rushing toward the entrance gate. It's understandable, he thought. We were told to avoid that one. But, he recalled something from present Mick's announcement. Wait, the wording was off. I get it now. Help. Izuku's attention snapped to the source of the scream. The purple-haired girl from earlier was trapped under rubble, and the robot was quickly closing in on her. Just as he prepared to act, something caught his eye. An orange-haired girl had broken away from the group and rushed to help the purple-haired girl. Izuku crouched, watching intently as the orange-haired girl struggled to lift the debris. Interesting, Izuku thought, observing the girl's forearms swell up as she effortlessly threw the rubble aside. She checked on the purple-haired girl, lifting her bridal style, and made a dash for the gate. Not everyone is here for fame and glory. Izuku smiled, but his expression quickly faltered as he realized the robot was almost upon them. In the dark room, Nisa watched the screen with barely contained excitement. He hit another button, and they all watched as the robot raised its arm. Behind him, the group began shouting for him to stop. Nezu. What are you doing? The X-rated heroine screamed in horror. Damn it, Nezu. You're going too far. The cowboy hero yelled. Nezu? Are you trying to get US sued or something? Cementos shouted at the rodent. Nezu. Stop this now. Even Izawa yelled, his voice laced with barely concealed fear. Izuku's brow furrowed in confusion as he watched the giant robot raise its massive arm as if preparing for an attack. What is UA thinking? Izuku mused, his eyes widening when the robot's hand began to descend. Damn it. Reacting instantly, he formed a quick seal with his hands and vanished from his position. In the dimly lit room, everyone stared in horror at the giant robot's hand as it descended upon the two candidates. Then something even more unsettling occurred. Midnight clasped her hands to her mouth, her eyes wide with dread. Mike had his hands on his head, staring in disbelief as the situation escalated. Snipe, Izawa, Cementos, Power Loader, and Ectoplasm stood frozen in shock, eyes glued to the screen. What had just transpired? The orange-haired girl who had rescued the purple-haired girl had seen the robot's hand coming down on them. Without a second thought, she hurled the purple-haired girl to safety, throwing her own life into jeopardy. The robot's hand crashed to the ground, causing an enormous explosion and enveloping the area in a cloud of dust and debris. What have you done? Midnight screamed in agony. The rodent creature remained silent. Instead, a manic laugh escaped him. Ha. Ha 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 ha. Mike glanced at Nizu in disbelief. He's completely lost it. But Nizu didn't seem crazy. Why was he laughing like that? Because the figure he had been so intrigued by had vanished from the screen right before the robot's hand hit the ground. Look. Ectoplasm exclaimed, pointing to another screen. Everyone turned in surprise. As the dust settled, they saw that the robot's hand hadn't even touched the ground. In front of it, obscured by the remaining smoke, a shadowy figure stood tall. I knew it. I knew it. Nisa shouted, laughing manically once more. Meanwhile, in City A, the other candidates watched in stunned disbelief. UA was known for its reputation as the top hero school, but witnessing such extreme measures left them shaken. They had just watched as UA appeared to kill two candidates without hesitation. It dawned on all of them that present Mick's words were true. This wasn't a simulation, it was real. And they couldn't afford to underestimate the situation. What? What just happened? A candidate whispered, his voice filled with horror. As the dust cleared, the purple-haired girl was seen sitting on the ground, staring in shock. Soon after, many breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the orange-haired girl was unharmed. But how was that possible? They had all witnessed the robot's hand crushing the girl. Yet, she was standing there, safe. The dust settled further, revealing the green-haired boy from before, the one who had been effortlessly dispatching robots. He had protected the girl. The orange-haired girl had, without hesitation, thrown the purple-haired girl to safety when she saw the robot's impending strike. She had braced herself for the worst, but the pain never came. For a moment, she thought she might already be dead until a voice broke the silence. A calm, almost melodic voice. Hey. You all right? She blinked, looking up to see the green-haired boy standing in front of her. His left arm was held out horizontally in front of his chest, his hand in a claw-like shape. His other hand was pointed downward, forming a gesture like a spirit gun. And then she noticed the robot's hand, hovering just inches away from him, seemingly trapped by some invisible force. Yo. You all right or not? The boy asked again. Shaking herself from her stupor, the orange-haired girl responded, yes. Yes, I'm all right. The boy smiled at her. That's good, he said. Then, he turned toward the robot and smirked. Just stay put. This'll be over soon. Izuku shifted his left arm, placing his palm just inches away from the robot's hand. A faint bluish energy washed over the robot's arm, from the hand to the shoulder. Then, in a shocking moment, the robot's arm was ripped apart. The mechanical pieces hovered in the air before dropping to the ground. Izuku let his left arm fall to his side, then nonchalantly put his right hand in his pocket. He turned and walked toward the orange-haired girl, a calm expression on his face. He glanced back and saw that the robot had become unresponsive, then turned his attention to the girl. Well, I think that should handle it, don't you agree? What in the world was that? The orange-haired girl asked, astonished. My ability, Izuku responded briefly, flashing her a wide grin. By the way, I'm Izuku Midoriya. What's your name? It's getting a bit odd referring to you as the girl with orange hair in my head. Itsuka Kendo, the orange-haired girl replied. Thanks for saving me. Izuku waved it off. It's no big deal. He tilted his body slightly to look past Itsuka, a broad grin forming on his face. Hey, look, it's the feminist from earlier. The purple-haired girl twitched and whipped her head toward him. Izuku strolled toward her with Itsuka following behind. He bent so that his face was in front of hers and asked with a broad smile, how's it feel to be saved by a pervert? It's not my fault you were ogling midnight, you idiot, the purple-haired girl snapped. Izuku burst into laughter. Come on, Purple, what's your name? I'm Izuku Midoriya. Jiro Kyoka, she muttered, clearly not happy. Izuku feigned shock. What? You have a girl's name? Why would your parents name you after a girl? You moron. Jiro yelled, tossing a small stone at him, which halted inches away from his face. Then, a sound reached Izuku's ears. He turned to see that the robot he had assumed was disabled was moving again. It had raised its other arm, which began to spin at such a speed that it created a huge gust of wind, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. Itsuka, get Jiro out of here, Izuku said, his tone even. What? Itsuka looked at him, concerned. But what about you? Izuku smirked at her. Don't worry about me. Just take Miss Feminist and get out of here. Itsuka hesitated. She didn't want to leave the boy to face that monstrous robot alone, but she had already seen him stop the robot's hand with ease. You could come with us, she suggested. Izuku shot a glance her way before returning his focus to the robot. That thing won't leave us alone. We have maybe a minute before it starts shooting. Even if we run, he pointed at the giant guns mounted on the robot, it could start firing. But if you fight it, you'll be disqualified, Itsuka argued. I know, Izuku replied, then turned to her with a confident smile. But I'm not fighting it. I'm just protecting myself and anyone around me. So, don't worry, okay? Get yourself to safety. He waved her off with a playful gesture. Itsuka realized that he wasn't going to listen, and seeing no other choice, she picked up Jiro and threw her over her shoulder. She quickly turned and ran toward the entrance of the city. Hey, Green. Jiro called from Itsuka's shoulder. Izuku turned his head and raised an eyebrow at her. You better be okay, you bastard. I still need to beat you for being a pervert. Jiro shouted. Izuku chuckled and shook his head. That girl, he thought, before flashing her a bright smile and a thumbs up. Then, in the blink of an eye, the robot's hand crashed down on top of Izuku. The impact sent shockwaves, throwing everything nearby away. Dust and smoke engulfed the area once more. Back in the observation room, the UA staff watched helplessly. They had just witnessed what appeared to be the death of another student. There was no way anyone could survive that. And they were almost certain they would lose their jobs by the end of the day. But then, something caught their attention. Through the dust and smoke, a shadowy figure appeared. Both Jiro and Itsuka were sent flying into the air before landing roughly on the ground. They spun around, unable to believe what they were seeing. No, Jiro whispered in disbelief. UA wouldn't go this far, right? Right. Itsuka could hear the panic in her voice, and she could feel it creeping into her own chest. What was happening was unreal. UA was supposed to be the top hero school, but this was crossing the line. Were the other examins facing this kind of danger as well? Then, something caught Itsuka's eye. A shadowy figure was standing amidst the smoke. Look. Over there, she pointed to Jiro. What the heck? Did Green survive that? How? Jiro asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. As the smoke began to clear, it revealed Izuku standing tall on one of the robot's massive fingers. His hands were on his hips, and he tilted his head, looking at the robot's gleaming red eye with a smirk. What was even more shocking was that not a single scratch marred his clothes, or his body for that matter. It was as if the machine had never attempted to crush the boy a second ago. "I don't understand what UA is trying to do," Izuku remarked, his face displaying a smirk but his voice as cold as ice, "but you sure do seem expensive." The machine didn't respond. Instead, it raised its arm, sending Izuku soaring into the sky. Upside down, Izuku peered at the enormous machine that had just attacked him. It had drawn its arm back, seemingly preparing for another strike. But it would never get the chance to do so. Izuku thrust his arms forward, striking a familiar pose. A dangerous expression crossed his face. Maximum cursed energy output. The robot froze. It didn't even twitch. Limitless. Above the machine, the air began swirling in a spherical pattern. In the observation room, the UA staff sat at the edge of their seats, eyes glued to the screens showing the unfolding battle in City A. "You all might want to take a look at this," Power Loader said, pointing at a monitor showing the infrared feed of the city. Everyone shifted their attention to the screen, their eyes widening yet again. "What the?" Snipe muttered. Above the robot, where the regular monitors displayed a swirling mass of air, the infrared screen showed a blue sphere. "Blue." Izuku's menacing voice echoed throughout the city. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal being torn apart. Suddenly, the metal atop the robot's head detached and was drawn upward, defying gravity. One by one, each section of the robot was torn apart, first the head, then the arms, followed by the torso. "The hell?" one of the candidates exclaimed, stumbling backward in disbelief. For the first time that day, the eyes of the students were no longer filled with fear. They were wide with shock, awe, and wonder. Could this person even be on their level? Both Itsuka and Jiro stood frozen, utterly stunned by the scene. Is this guy even one of us? Was the question running through everyone's minds. Back in the observation room, the staff members who were standing collapsed back into their seats, mouths agape. "What in the world?" Midnight muttered, capturing everyone's thoughts perfectly. But why were they all so shocked? Because, hovering above City A was a massive sphere made of the robot's shredded metal. The sphere was easily the size of a 10-story building. The colossal robot that had terrorized the city was no longer visible. In its place was the metal sphere, a collection of every scrap of the robot. If any parts had been large, they had been compressed to a size small enough to fit into a pocket. Every piece of the machine had succumbed to the gravitational pull of that sphere. Without warning, the metallic orb plummeted to the earth. The sound of its impact echoed through the city as the sphere burst apart, scattering pieces of metal across the ground. Itsuka and Jiro stared at the enormous pile of robot parts that now lay before them. Then, Izuku dropped down in front of them. "Yo." He greeted, smiling as if he hadn't just obliterated a massive robot. "Damn, Green." Jiro groaned, rubbing her temples. "I already feel a headache coming on." "What just happened?" Itsuka asked, utterly dumbfounded. Izuku shrugged casually, his grin widening. "Mic work. Anyway," he said as he started walking toward the entrance, "nice meeting you two. See you at UA if you manage to pass. Time's up. Everyone gather up for a checkup by the medical bots." Present Mix voice boomed across the city. Small robots soon flooded the area, moving from student to student, conducting check UPS and administering first aid where necessary. Those with more severe injuries were carried away to the medical facility. As Jiro was being prepped to be carried off, she glanced at Itsuka. "Hey, Itsuka." "Yeah." The orange-haired girl replied, also preparing for medical transport. Did Green just say that like he was certain he was getting into UA, even after all that? "I don't know," Itsuka answered blankly, "and I don't want to think about any of this anymore." Izuku was walking out of UA, the same way he had entered. He had received a message from Itsu to meet at Gate 1. Arriving at the location, he stopped in his tracks. He took off his glasses, wiped them with a handkerchief, and rubbed his eyes before putting them back on. When he saw it, he couldn't believe it. Itsu was talking to a girl. Or rather, the girl was talking animatedly to Itsu, while he stood there looking awkward. Suddenly, Itsu's gaze locked onto Izuku. "Midoriya. Finally made it." Izuku walked over to them with a grin. "Itsu. Wait, you've got a girlfriend without telling me? Was I not enough?" Izuku acted mockingly hurt, glancing away. The girl with brown hair flushed and shyly fiddled with her fingers. "Stop embarrassing me," Itsu yelled, making the girl chuckle. He quickly cleared his throat and regained his composure. Anyway, this is Okako Uraraka. Okako gave a polite bow. It's a pleasure to meet you. Izuku chuckled and returned the bow. Izuku Midoriya. I'm glad to meet you too. Hey Green. The trio turned to see two girls jogging toward them. Kyuka and Kendo, you're here too. I didn't get a chance to thank you for saving me, Green. You just ran off, Jiro said, reaching them with Itsuka. It's all good, Izuku responded. Midoriya, do you know them? Itza asked, looking at Izuku. Yup. Itza, Okako, me, Izuku was about to continue, but Jiro cut him off. We can introduce ourselves, Green, Jiro said, rolling her eyes. I'm Kyuka Jiro. And I'm Itsuka Kendo. Itza Tinya, Itza said, bowing. Okako Uraraka, she added with a smile. So, do you three know each other? Jiro asked, pointing from Izuku to Itza to Okako. Okako quickly shook her head. No. Itza-kun just saved me during the exam. Izuku clapped Itza on the shoulder. Damn, Itza. Looks like my lessons worked. You know, the way to a girl's heart is either saving her or running your hand through her chest. What kind of nonsense is that? Jiro asked flatly. Anime logic, Izuku replied proudly. You sound way too proud of that, Jiro mocked. You wouldn't get it, Izuku dismissed, laughing. You're not a girl. A flying shoe suddenly zoomed toward him, halting just inches from his face. Itsuka sighed at the sight of the annoyed purple-haired girl. Say, how did you three meet? Itza asked. Well, Itsuka began, Midoriya-kun saved us from getting squashed. What? How did that happen? Okako gasped. Long story short, Jiro continued, I got stuck, Itsuka tried to help, then the giant robot attacked us, and Green here destroyed it. It literally turned into a floating metal moon, Itsuka added. Wait, Okako whispered. Destroyed. That robot was massive. How did he do that? You'd have to ask him, Jiro said, but he claims it's his quirk. Midoriya. Itza exclaimed. You weren't supposed to fight the robot. You could be disqualified. Izuku looked at him, puzzled. You didn't get it. What? Itsuka asked, raising an eyebrow. President Mike told us not to engage the robot first, Izuku explained, but he never said we couldn't fight if it attacked us first. What? The robot attacked you first. Itza said, stunned. That's what's confusing me too, Izuku replied dryly. Maybe it was a glitch or something. Such mistakes aren't expected from you, Itza noted seriously. Izuku shrugged. Doesn't matter. The bot was going after civilians. In the pre-test meeting, President Mike compared the bot to a real-life villain. As sidekicks, we're meant to protect civilians first. If the villain attacks first, we're allowed to fight back. Damn, that's smart, Jiro muttered, impressed. That makes sense, Itsuka murmured, nodding. I didn't even think that was allowed, Okako said in disbelief. You've just shown why you're going to be an incredible hero, Midoriya, Itza said, I must learn more from you. Izuku scratched the back of his neck modestly. Jiro snorted. Great hero? This pervert. Why would you say that, Jiro? Okako asked, curious. Jiro gave Izuku a sly grin. Well, before the exam started, I saw him all flustered over Ms. Midnight. What? Itza, Okako, and Itsuka stared at Izuku in shock. Midoriya. You should never act that way toward an older woman. Itza scolded, his disappointment clear. Why are you all looking at me like that? Izuku shouted, feeling embarrassed. And you? Don't spread weird rumors. Jiro only laughed, smirking. I stand by my words. You're kidding. Chill out, Green. That kind of aggression won't impress anyone. Izuku huffed, walking away. Like you'd know anything about being a girl. Another shoe whizzed past him, stopping just before impact. He was soon joined by Itza, Okako, Jiro, and Itsuka. The girls chatted among themselves, with Itza occasionally chiming in. That day, Izuku Midoriya made 3 more friends and even got their contact information. For the first time in a long while, Izuku felt truly alive, thanks to the exam where he could finally let loose. And on that day, Izuku Midoriya took his first step toward becoming the symbol of power, hope, and peace. Unknowingly, he also began his journey to be remembered as the greatest hero in history.